Take the house, take the truck, take the $64,000 account, Dwayne Mercer said, laughing at the lawyer's table, but leave Mom and Dad the $5 dump. The dump was Mercer's Rest, 12 dead rooms off Route 19. The town laughed with him. Laurel called it a motel for possums with a sign. Earl Mercer said nothing. Ruth Mercer folded the deed on its old creases, wiped Dwayne's spilled coffee off the table, and told Earl to take his heart pills. Then the highway department filed for land near the old Elk Creek Bridge, and the $5 sign began to rattle. Let it start with the laugh. The lawyer's office sat over Guthrie Insurance on Main Street in Briar Hollow, West Virginia. It had 3 narrow windows, a flag in the corner, and a table too shiny for bad news. Ruth Mercer hated that table. It showed every fingerprint. Earl sat beside her with both hands on his cane. He was 76, broad through the shoulders still, but worn at the knees. 50 years around county graders and salt trucks had left him with joints that sounded like gravel. Ruth was 74. She wore a teal cardigan buttoned wrong at the bottom. She noticed it after they sat down, then left it that way. Some days dignity had to pick its battles. Across from them sat Dwayne Mercer, their oldest son. Dwayne wore a gray sport coat and a watch he kept checking. Beside him sat Laurel, his wife, with a leather folder on her lap and a phone face down near her pink nails. Their daughter, Karen, had not come. Their younger son, Mark, had called from Charleston and said he trusted Dwayne to handle it. Funny thing, trust. It often travels in the wrong direction. Mr. Brackett, the probate lawyer, cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, he said, as we discussed, Amos Bell's remaining property is limited. Ruth looked at the paper in front of him. Her father's name looked small typed there. Amos Bell. He had been dead 11 days, buried on a Tuesday behind Briar Hollow Baptist, up the hill where the wind kept moving through the cedars. Ruth had cooked for other people after funerals for 38 years. Ham biscuits, green beans, potato salad in bowls with names taped underneath. For her own father, she had eaten half a cracker. Mr. Brackett tapped the first page. The house on Spruce Lane transferred earlier by quitclaim deed. Dwayne nodded, like a man approving weather. The 2016 Ford truck was signed over last month. That was practical, Laurel said. Earl can't drive it safely anymore. Earl looked at her. I drove plow trucks through ice on Dead Man's Grade. That was years ago, Laurel said. Ruth's hand moved under the table. She touched Earl's wrist once. Mr. Brackett went on. The First Valley Savings account, ending in 4412, contains $64,000. That transfer was also completed before Mr. Bell passed. Dwayne leaned back. Granddad wanted things managed properly. Ruth said Daddy could barely hold a pen. He knew enough, Dwayne said. There it was, the clean version, the kind that leaves no bruise. Mr. Brackett looked uncomfortable. Not sorry, uncomfortable. There is a difference, and older people learn it the hard way. The remaining asset, he said, is the former roadside motel, Mercer's Rest, 12 units, office, storage shed, and frontage along old Route 19. Laurel made a little sound, not quite a laugh. Worse. The $5 dump, Dwayne said. Mr. Brackett blinked. Dwayne smiled wider. Come on, everybody calls it that. Room's $5 cash and no questions. That sign's been rusting since I was in school. Ruth looked down at the deed. The paper smelled faintly of dust and the lawyer's copier. Your grandfather built those rooms, she said, and nobody slept in them since 1998, Dwayne said, except maybe rats. Laurel leaned toward Ruth with her soft public voice. Ruth, this is actually better for you. You and Earl don't need real property. You couldn't manage property anymore. Earl's jaw moved once. We managed 5 children. Laurel's smile thinned. That's different. It sure is, Earl said. Dwayne gave a short laugh. Dad, don't make this emotional. The house needed someone with income. The truck needed maintenance. The account needed oversight. The motel is just land with problems. Then why not take it too? Ruth asked. Silence came down fast. Dwayne glanced at Laurel. Laurel opened her folder. We've already made plans based on the other transfers, she said. My salon is adding 2 stations. Dwayne found a crew cab Chevy at Hensley Motors. We can't get tied up with demolition costs. Dwayne pointed a finger at the deed. So take the house, take the truck, Take the $64,000 account, he said, laughing at the lawyer's table, but leave Mom and Dad the $5 dump. Laurel laughed then, a small sound, clean and mean. Ruth did not answer. She folded the motel deed once, then again, right along creases made years before. She took a paper napkin from Mr. Brackett's coffee tray and wiped the ring Dwayne's cup had left on the table. "Mom," Dwayne said, "you don't have to do that." "Yes," Ruth said, "I do." She slid the deed into her purse. The purse was old brown leather, scratched at the clasp. Inside it, tied to the zipper pull, was a faded ribbon with 6 motel keys. Ruth still carried them because Amos had handed them to her when she was 19 and said, "A key means somebody trusts you." Dwayne had never asked why she kept them. Children miss what doesn't shine. Ruth turned to Earl. "Pill," she said. Earl frowned. "I took it." "You took the white one, not the little yellow one." He opened the tin in his coat pocket. His big fingers worked slowly. Ruth passed him the water bottle from her purse. Dwayne watched, embarrassed. Laurel watched like it proved her point. Mr. Brackett shuffled papers. "I need signatures acknowledging receipt of the motel deed." Ruth took the pen. Her name came out steady. Ruth Bell Mercer. Earl signed under her. His hand shook near the end, but only near the end. When they stood, Dwayne stood too. "Now don't go running out there today," he said. "That roof is bad. I can have one of my guys look at it." "No," Earl said. "It's not safe." "Neither are most promises," Ruth said. Dwayne's face changed. Laurel snapped her folder shut. "Ruth," she said, "we're trying to help." Ruth looked at her daughter-in-law. "No, honey, you're trying to finish." Nobody spoke after that. Down on Main Street, coal trucks rattled past the Dollar General. Their trailers slapped over potholes by the crosswalk. Briar Hollow had 4 churches, 1 school, 2 gas stations, and enough memory to make every mistake last 30 years. By noon, half the town knew. By 2, Earl and Ruth heard the first joke. They were outside Miller's pharmacy. Ruth had bought Earl's refill $18.40 after insurance and a bag of peppermints for the glove box of a truck they no longer had. A man by the newspaper rack called out, "Earl, you renting rooms yet?" His friend laughed. "Better bring my $5." Earl kept walking. Ruth did too. Near the curb, a woman from church touched Ruth's sleeve. "I'm sorry about your daddy," she said. "Thank you, May." The woman lowered her voice. "Dwayne says you got the motel. Maybe that's a blessing." Ruth looked across Main Street. Dwayne's white pickup sat outside the diner. Not Earl's old truck, Dwayne's own. Shined tires, tinted windows, chrome step bars. "A blessing doesn't usually come with people laughing," Ruth said. May's mouth opened, then closed. Ruth regretted the sharpness right away. May had not taken anything. She only lived in a town that enjoyed a story. That was all, and that was plenty. Earl and Ruth rode home in a church van, driven by a 19-year-old named Caleb. He was kind enough not to talk much. He dropped them at the small rental duplex behind the laundromat, where Dwayne had moved them 6 weeks earlier, just until things settled. Things had settled all right, settled on their chests. The duplex had beige carpet, low ceilings, and a heat pump that clicked like a nervous tooth. Ruth set the pharmacy bag on the counter. Earl stood in the middle of the room like he had misplaced himself. Their old house on Spruce Lane had a porch Earl built in 1983. It had a pantry Ruth painted yellow. It had a pencil mark by the kitchen door for every grandchild's height. Now it had Laurel's salon samples stacked in the dining room. Ruth took off her cardigan. "Sit," she said. "I'm not tired." "Sit anyway." Earl sat. She put the little yellow pill in his palm. He swallowed it. Then he said, "Your daddy wouldn't have done this." "No. He'd have left you the house." "No," Ruth said again. Earl looked at her. She opened her purse and took out the folded deed, then the ribbon of keys. The metal clinked softly. He left what he meant to leave. Earl stared at the keys. "Ruth, I don't know why. That place is falling in. I know. Roof over Unit 6 is gone. I know. Office floor's soft by the Coke machine. I remember. And Dwayne's right about one thing. It hasn't paid a dime in years." Ruth touched the top key with her thumb. The tag was cracked plastic. Number 3. "Daddy said something after Mama's burial," she said. "You remember?" Earl rubbed his knee. "He said a lot that week. He told me, don't sell the $5 place until the road comes asking. Earl gave a tired breath. Everybody thought he meant Route 19 traffic. I thought so too. What else would he mean? Ruth looked at the folded deed. I don't know. That was the truth, a small one. The next morning, they went to Mercer's Rest. Caleb from church offered to drive again, but Earl said no. He called Hollis Kincaid for a ride. Hollis did not answer, so Ruth paid $22 to Benny Sykes, who ran a taxi from his sister's old minivan. Benny talked the whole way. County ought to condemn that place, he said as they passed the Dollar General. No offense, Miss Ruth. None taken. Kids used to dare each other to touch the office door. Earl looked out the window. They should have dared each other to fix something. Benny laughed because he thought Earl was joking. They drove north along Route 19 past the old Elk Creek Bridge. The creek ran brown from last night's rain. Kudzu swallowed one side of the guardrail. Coal trucks groaned over the rise, their diesel smoke hanging low. Then Mercer's Rest appeared. 12 rooms in a bent row, peeling white paint, green doors, a gravel lot with grass through the middle, and the sign, Rooms $5. The letters were faded red. The metal frame leaned toward the road. One corner had rusted through and the whole thing shivered when trucks passed. Ruth saw it and stopped breathing for half a second. Not from sorrow, from recognition. Some places don't welcome you back. They ask why you took so long. Benny pulled in. His tires popped over gravel. Want me to wait? Earl opened his door. No. Y'all sure? Ruth paid him $22 and added $3 from the coin pocket of her purse. Benny looked at the 3 ones. You don't have to tip. You drove careful, Ruth said. He tucked the bills away. Well, watch for snakes. It's February, Earl said. Then watch for February snakes. Benny left them there. The minivan pulled back onto Route 19, and the road noise swallowed it. Ruth stood beside Earl. Rainwater dripped from the gutter over Unit 1. The office window had a crack shaped like a fork. The Coke machine was still on the porch, dead since the Clinton years. A strip of old police tape fluttered from the storage shed latch, though neither of them knew why. Earl shifted his cane. Lord. Ruth took out the keys. The ribbon trembled in the wind. You want to start with the office? I want to start with not falling down. That too. They crossed the lot slowly. Earl tested each step with his cane. Ruth walked on his left, close enough to catch his elbow but not holding it. He hated being pulled. She knew that. 53 years taught a person where help ended and insult began. At the office door, Ruth chose the square brass key. It stuck halfway. Earl leaned in. Lift while you turn. I know. Then lift more. She lifted. The lock gave. The door opened with a swollen scrape. The office smelled of damp paper, mouse droppings, and old pine cleaner. Not pleasant, not hopeless either. A counter ran along the right wall. Behind it sat a stool with cracked vinyl. The pegboard still held room keys for units 7 through 12. A calendar from October 1998 hung near the phone. Ruth touched it. October 1998. That was the month Amos closed for winter and never reopened. He told folks the bypass rumors had killed business. He told Ruth he was tired of changing sheets for men who smoked in bed. Both could be true. Earl went behind the counter. Floor's soft. By the Coke machine, Ruth said. I told you. I'm verifying. You always were official. He gave her a look. A small smile nearly reached him. Nearly. Ruth opened the cash drawer. Empty. She opened the guest register. The last name written there was Lloyd and Penny Watts. September 14th, 1998, Unit 4, $5 cash. Under notes, Amos had written, Towels returned, nice folks. Ruth ran her finger over the line. Her father's handwriting leaned left, always had. Earl looked under the counter. Old invoices. We'll need a trash pile. We'll need 10 trash piles. A truck slowed on Route 19, then another. Ruth heard laughter. A young man yelled, Got vacancy? The truck sped away. Earl kept his back turned. Ruth closed the guest book. Let a town laugh long enough, and it starts thinking laughter is evidence. By noon, Ruth had swept one corner clean. Earl had found a breaker box and confirmed half the labels were wrong. They shared peanut butter crackers from Ruth's purse and drank water from an old thermos. At 12:40, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Laurel stepped out first. Dwayne followed. He wore new boots. Not work boots, store boots. Boots with no mud and too much confidence. Laurel looked at the motel like it might stain her. "Oh, Ruth," she said. "This is worse than I remembered." Earl came out of the office. "What do you want?" Dwayne held up both hands. "Peace offering." "You bring back my truck?" Dwayne's smile dropped. "Dad, you said offering?" Laurel walked to the sign and snapped a picture. "For insurance," she said. "You don't insure it," Ruth said. "No, but somebody should document the condition before anyone gets hurt." Dwayne looked at the office roof. "I've got a guy with a dump trailer. He can haul most of this junk off. We'll take the sign, the Coke machine, scrap metal, maybe clear the lot." "No," Ruth said. Dwayne turned. "Mom, don't be stubborn." "No, you can't keep all this. We can keep what's ours." Laurel laughed once. There it was again. Small, mean. "Ruth, you're living in a duplex behind Sud's barn. Maybe pride isn't the best financial plan." Earl stepped forward. "My wife said no." Dwayne's voice hardened. "I'm trying to save you money." "You already saved plenty," Earl said. Dwayne looked at him for a long second. Then he looked at the sign. "That thing's a hazard. Wind'll take it down." As if answering, a coal truck passed. The $5 sign shook hard. Inside it, something clicked. Ruth heard it. Earl heard it too. Dwayne did not. He was busy looking at his phone. Laurel said, "We have a meeting at the bank at 3. "For the pickup?" Earl asked. Dwayne's face colored. "For business." "Sure." Dwayne pointed at the office. "You'll call me when you get tired of playing Motel." Ruth said, "No, I don't think I will." Laurel walked back to the SUV. Dwayne followed. Before he got in, he called, "Don't blame us when this place costs more than it's worth." Ruth looked at the rusted sign. "It already has," she said. The SUV left gravel dust behind. Earl waited until it was gone. Then he said, "You heard that?" "Yes." "Inside the sign?" "Yes." "Could be rust." "Could be. Could be a bird nest." "In February?" He looked at her. "February bird." That made her laugh. Not much. Enough. They did not open the sign that day. Earl's knees had started to swell, and Ruth saw it before he admitted it. They locked the office at 2:15 and called Benny from the motel phone, which somehow still gave a dial tone after Ruth plugged it in and jiggled the cord. Benny answered on the 5th ring. "Mercer's Rest?" he said. Ruth looked at the old black phone. "How'd you know?" "Caller ID says Mercer Rest Office. I thought it was a ghost." "Just Ruth." "That's better. Can you come?" 15 minutes. While they waited, the mail carrier pulled into the gravel lot. She was a thin woman named Denise, with a knit cap pulled low. She held one large envelope and 3 pieces of junk mail. "I didn't know whether to leave this," Denise said, "but it's addressed here." Ruth took it. The envelope was from the West Virginia Division of Highways. Earl's hand tightened on his cane. Ruth read the front twice. "Mercer's Rest Route 19, frontage parcel, Briar Hollow, West Virginia, 25812. Denise shifted her mail bag. "Looks official." "Yes." "Sorry if it's bad." Ruth looked at the envelope. "Official usually is." Denise gave a quick smile and drove off. Earl and Ruth stood under the motel porch. Traffic moved beyond the sign. The envelope felt heavy. "Open it," Earl said. Ruth slid one finger under the flap. Inside was a stapled packet. 6 pages, a map, a notice date, a case number, words like corridor review and frontage acquisition and Route 19 bypass alignment. Ruth read slowly. Earl read over her shoulder. "State intends to evaluate certain parcels," he said. His voice had changed. Not hopeful, alert. Road crewmen knew state paperwork the way cooks knew spoiled milk. Ruth turned the map sideways. A bold line cut near Elk Creek Bridge. Then across the motel frontage, right across Mercer's Rest. At the bottom of the second page, someone had stamped "Received." Date, February 9th. 3 days before the will meeting. Ruth's mouth went dry. "Dwayne didn't mention this." "No," Earl said. Maybe he didn't know. Earl looked at the road. A coal truck passed. The sign shook. Click. This time louder. Ruth held the highway department packet against her chest. Earl stared at the sign. "That ain't rust," he said. Benny's minivan turned into the lot before either of them moved. He rolled down the window. "You ready?" Earl did not answer. Ruth folded the packet once, careful with the map. She placed it inside her purse beside the deed and the ribbon of keys. Then she looked at the sign. Rooms $5, faded, crooked, laughable, and rattling. "Tomorrow," she said. Earl nodded. But that night, in the duplex behind the laundromat, neither of them slept much. The heat pump clicked. A washing machine thumped through the wall. At 1:12 in the morning, Ruth got up and sat at the kitchen table. She opened her purse and laid out 3 things: the motel deed, the highway department filing, the faded ribbon of keys. Earl came in wearing socks and an old undershirt. "You're supposed to be sleeping," she said. "So are you." He lowered himself into the chair across from her. For a while, they said nothing. Then Ruth touched the highway packet. "Daddy knew something." "Maybe. He told me not to sell." "Ruth." "I know. It could be nothing." Earl reached for the map. His mechanic's hands flattened it gently. He traced the bypass line with one thick finger. "I spent 31 years with county roads," he said. "State doesn't send this for nothing." "What does it mean?" "It means they're looking. At the motel. At the frontage." Ruth looked at him. "How much frontage?" "Enough to make Dwayne sorry if he finds out." A car hissed past outside. Water ran through the laundromat pipes. Ruth leaned back. "I don't want to be that kind of mother." "What kind?" "The kind who wants her son sorry." Earl's face softened, then hardened again. "He took your father's house." "Our house too." "He took my truck." "Yes." "He let Laurel talk to you like you were a chair they didn't need." Ruth closed her eyes. That one landed. Earl reached across the table. His fingers covered hers. "You don't have to want him sorry," he said, "but you don't have to keep him comfortable either." The next morning, Ruth called Hollis Kincaid again. This time he answered, "Hollis, it's Ruth Mercer." "Well, Ruth Bell," he said. "I heard about Amos. I should have come by." "You sent a card." "A card's not a visit." "No." He sighed. "Fair." Hollis was 78 and lived up Sugar Camp Road. He had been county road foreman before Earl retired. Before that, he had worked survey crews with Amos Bell during summers when Briar Hollow still had 2 movie screens and a hardware store that sold nails by weight. Ruth held the phone cord. "We got a filing from the highway department." Silence, not confusion, silence. "Hollis? What kind of filing?" "Route 19 bypass. Frontage acquisition review." Another pause. "Where'd it come?" "To the motel." "Mercer's Rest?" "Yes." "Don't talk about that on the phone." Ruth looked at Earl. He sat upright. "Hollis." "I'll be there in 40 minutes, he said. "Here?" "No, the motel. Bring what they sent." "And Ruth?" "Yes?" "Bring whatever keys Amos left you." Hollis Kincaid's truck was older than most of the cars still running in Briar Hollow. A green Ford, dented on one side, county decals long painted over. He parked it crooked in the gravel and got out slow, favoring one hip. He didn't say hello first. He looked at the sign. "Lord," he said, "they let that thing lean that far?" "Wind's been working on it," Earl said. Hollis walked closer. He put one hand flat against the metal frame, like checking a horse's side. "You hear anything in there?" he asked. Ruth looked at Earl. Earl looked at Hollis. "You heard about that already?" Earl said. "I didn't hear anything." "I'm asking." "There's a rattle," Ruth said. "Started yesterday. Trucks pass, and something moves." Hollis nodded slow, like a man confirming a diagnosis he didn't want. "Show me the keys," he said. Ruth held out the ribbon. Hollis didn't touch it. He just looked, the way a man looks at a photograph he wasn't ready for. "Amos still had that ribbon," he said. "Same one from the 70s. You knew it?" "I gave him the ribbon." Nobody said anything for a second. A coal truck passed on Route 19. The sign shivered. Something inside knocked twice, soft, then stopped. "There," Hollis said. "That's not rust." "That's what I said," Earl told him. "You're right then." Hollis stepped back and studied the sign frame top to bottom. Back panel. "See here." He pointed low, near the base, where a rectangle of metal sat slightly proud of the rest. "That's not original. Somebody added that." Ruth's chest tightened. Daddy? Had to be. Earl ran his thumb along the seam. 4 screws, rusted but not rusted shut. He fished a folding knife from his pocket and worked the first one loose. It took time. His hands shook a little, not from age, from wanting. "Let me," Hollis said. "I got it. Earl, I got it." Hollis let him. Ruth held the flashlight, though there was still daylight. It felt right to hold something. The second screw came easier. The third dropped into the gravel, and Ruth caught it before it rolled under the signpost. The fourth Earl backed out with his fingers, the metal biting his skin. The panel came free with a groan. Inside the hollow base of the sign sat a shape wrapped in oilcloth, tied twice with wire. Grease had gone dark and sticky over the years, but the cloth had held. Nobody reached for it right away. "Go on," Hollis said quietly. Ruth lifted it out. It weighed more than she expected. She set it on the porch step and untwisted the wire with fingers that didn't feel like her own. Inside the cloth was a tin box, the kind that once held hard candy or pipe tobacco. The lid was rusted at the corners but closed tight. Earl worked his knife under the edge. It popped with a small metallic sigh. Inside, a folded survey tag, brittle and yellowed, tied to a short length of steel chain. And beneath the tag, taped flat to the bottom of the tin, a brass key. Ruth picked up the tag first. Faded ink, but still legible. Route 19, Corridor Survey, 1974, STA 220 plus 00, HK. She read the initials twice. HK, she said, and looked up. Hollis had gone still. His mouth was a straight line. He reached out slow and took the tag from her hand like it might come apart in the air. "That's mine," he said. "Yours?" "My mark. 1974. I was 26 years old and I set that stake myself." He turned it over. Amos held the rod. I called out the numbers. He wrote them down. His voice thinned. "We surveyed this whole frontage for the state before either of us had gray in our hair." Earl frowned. "Surveyed it for what?" "The bypass. The real one, not the little rumor everybody talks about at the diner." Hollis looked at Route 19, at the coal trucks grinding past. State wanted to run 19 straight through here in the 70s. Cut out the old S-curve by the bridge, would have saved trucks 20 minutes a run. What happened? Money happened. Coal prices dropped. Project got shelved. He tapped the tag against his palm. Shelved, not killed. There's a difference, and most folks don't know it. Ruth felt her pulse in her ears. Daddy knew it. Amos worked that crew 2 summers. He knew exactly what shelved meant. Hollis handed the tag back to her, careful, like returning something borrowed a long time ago. He used to say the state never really lets go of a corridor, just naps on it. "Then the road comes asking," Ruth said. Hollis looked at her. "What? That's what he told me, after Mama's funeral. Don't sell the $5 place until the road comes asking." Hollis was quiet a moment. Then he nodded once, slow, like a man setting down a heavy box. "Well," he said, "looks like it's asking." Earl held the brass key up to the light. Small, simple, no room number stamped on it. Not like the others on Ruth's ribbon. "This doesn't match any door here," Earl said. "No," Hollis agreed. "Too small for a room lock. That's a drawer key, or a box key." Ruth thought of the office, the counter, the cash drawer she'd already found, empty, unlocked. "There's another drawer," she said suddenly. "Under the counter. On the end. I tried it yesterday and it wouldn't budge. I thought it was just stuck." "Show me," Hollis said. They went in together, the 3 of them, boots loud on the swollen floorboards. The office smelled the same, damp paper and old pine cleaner. The October 1998 calendar still hung by the phone, patient as ever. Ruth knelt by the end of the counter. There, low, half hidden by a warped baseboard, was a narrow drawer with a small brass keyhole. She'd tugged it the day before and felt only the give of rust, nothing more. Earl crouched beside her, knees complaining the whole way down. "Try it," he said. Ruth took the key from him. Her hand wasn't steady. She pressed it to the lock. It slid in clean. No forcing, no scraping. "That fits," Hollis said low. Ruth turned it. Something inside gave way with a small, tired click, the sound of a lock finally doing the one job it had waited decades to do. The drawer didn't open on its own, it needed a pull. Ruth wrapped her fingers around the edge and felt it shift, stuck tight with age, resisting the way old wood resists anything new. Careful, Earl said. Don't force the front off. I'm not forcing. You're forcing a little. Earl. Hollis put a hand on the counter to steady himself and leaned in, watching the seam of the drawer like it might tell him something before it opened. There's a name inside there, he said. I'd bet my truck on it. Ruth pulled again. The drawer gave another half-inch, groaning against the frame. Outside on Route 19, a truck downshifted for the curve by the bridge, the same curve the 1974 crew had once measured to cut out for good. The engine brake rattled through the lot, and the old sign shivered one more time on its bent post. Empty now, its secret already out. Ruth pulled again, and the drawer let go all at once. Dust rose off the runners. Something inside slid forward and hit the front lip with a soft thud. Earl leaned in. Well? Ruth reached inside. Her fingers found paper first, then something stiffer underneath, rolled tight. She drew out a folded document, edges gone soft as cloth. Under it, a rolled sheet of heavier stock, the kind used for surveys and maps. A rubber band had been around it once. It had dried and snapped, but the paper still held its curl, like it remembered being tied. Hollis didn't move. He just watched her hands. Go slow, he said. That paper's older than your youngest. Ruth set the folded document on the counter first. She peeled back the top fold with 2 fingers. It was a form, typed, not handwritten. State letterhead across the top, faded but readable. West Virginia Department of Highways, Division of Right-of-Way. Earl read the title line out loud. Option to purchase, Route 19 corridor, Parcel 14-B. Ruth's breath caught. Parcel 14-B, Hollis said. That's this frontage. I surveyed that number myself. Ruth's eyes moved down the page, names typed in the blanks. Grantor, Amos R. Bell. A signature under it, in ink gone brown, but still Amos's hand. She'd know that slanted A anywhere. It was on every birthday card he'd ever sent her. Below his name, a state seal, embossed, pressed so hard it had torn slightly through the paper. He signed an option, Ruth said. In 1974? Let me see the date, Hollis said. She turned the page toward him. He read it without touching it, lips moving slightly, the way a man reads something he's afraid will vanish if he blinks. March the 8th, 1975, he said. 6 months after we set that stake. Earl frowned. What's an option even mean? Amos didn't sell the land. No, Hollis said. An option means the state locks in a price and terms now, so they can buy later, whenever the project actually gets funded. Landowner agrees not to fight it if the state ever comes calling. In exchange, the state promises a set payment plus damages if they ever exercise it. And if they never exercise it, Ruth asked, then it just sits, filed, recorded, waiting. Hollis tapped the page. This one's recorded. See the stamp bottom right, Mercer County Clerk. Book 212, page 44. Ruth looked at the number like it might mean something on its own. To her, it looked like a phone number more than a fortune. So it's real, she said. Not just paper. It's about as real as paper gets, Hollis said. That's a lien on this land in the state's favor, and a promise in yours. Both sides signed it. Both sides are still standing behind it, whether they remember or not. Earl unrolled the map sheet next, laying it flat across the counter. Ruth set the empty tin box on one corner to hold it down. The state seal ran along the border, faded blue ink on cream paper. A bold red line marked a new roadbed, cutting straighter than Route 19 ever had, curving away from the old S by the bridge. The red line ran directly through a rectangle marked Mercer's Rest, existing structure. There it is, Hollis said quietly. Whole frontage, both lots. Right of way plus 50 feet of buffer on each side. Ruth put her hand flat on the map, like she could hold it still. What's that worth, Hollis? Just tell me plain. Hollis rubbed his jaw. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the option contract again, at a clause halfway down the second page. There's a compensation schedule here, he said. Per acre frontage rate, plus a relocation allowance for a working business, plus damages if the state took longer than the option term to act. He read a moment more, his mouth tightening. This clause says, if they exercise more than 20 years past signing, damages indexed to current land value along the corridor, not $1975. English, Hollis, Earl said. They don't pay 1975 prices. They pay today's prices. Today's prices On frontage, the whole state's been fighting trucking companies to build code deep enough for. Hollis looked up at them both. Last frontage sale near the interchange at Elk Creek went for better than $60,000 an acre. You've got near 6 acres of road frontage here, plus a standing structure, plus this option's damages clause on top. Ruth felt her knees go soft. She held the counter. How much? She said again, not asking this time, telling him to say it. Hollis looked at the map, then at her. Somewhere north of $1.6 million. Could run past $1.8 million once you add the relocation piece and back interest on the delay. He said it plain, like reading a thermometer. I could be off some. A real appraiser would need to walk it, but I've read enough of these in my life to know I'm not off by much. Nobody spoke for a second. A truck passed outside, brakes hissing for the curve. The old sign, empty now, didn't rattle at all. It had given up everything it was holding. Earl sat down hard in the office chair behind the counter, the one with a broken caster that had been broken since before Ruth ever set foot in this room. He put both hands over his face. Earl, Ruth touched his shoulder. I hauled scrap off this lot 2 days ago in my head, he said through his hands. I told Dwayne he could take the Coke machine. You didn't let him. I almost did. He looked up at her. His eyes were wet, and he didn't bother hiding it. Your daddy knew. All this time. He knew, and he never once said the number. He wasn't a numbers man, Ruth said. He was a don't-sell man. Hollis folded his arms and looked at the option contract like it was an old friend he hadn't seen in years. Amos always did like to sit on a secret if it meant somebody had to earn it, he said. He surveyed for the state 2 summers, then quit and bought this frontage cheap before anybody else in the county knew a bypass was even being drawn up. Man had nerve. Or faith, Ruth said. Same thing some days, Hollis said. Ruth looked down at the option contract, then at the highway filing they'd carried in from the duplex, the notice with the February 9th stamp. She laid them side by side on the counter. This filing, she said, the one that came to us, is that the state finally deciding to use the old option? Hollis picked up the newer notice and skimmed it fast, his eyes narrowing at the case number. Corridor review. Frontage acquisition review. He tapped the page. That's step 1. That's the state waking this file back up after 50 years of sleep. They wouldn't send that unless somebody upstairs pulled parcel 14B and matched it against a live option still on the books. So they know, Earl said. The state already knows what this is. The state's lawyers know exactly what this is, Hollis said. Question is whether anybody told your son. Ruth's stomach turned over. Dwayne doesn't know about any of this. He thinks it's a $5 dump. For now, Hollis said. But options like this get flagged in county records the second a state review opens a file. Anybody who knows to look at the courthouse at the clerk's desk could find book 212, page 44, same as I just did in my head. Won't take a genius, just somebody nosy. Earl straightened up slow, wincing at his knees. Laurel's plenty nosy. Then you don't have long, Hollis said, not to sell. To protect what's already yours. This option is old, but it's still good paper. Long as nobody muddies the chain of who owns this ground right now. Ruth thought of the will meeting, the lawyer's table. The deed Dwayne had waved off without reading, laughing about the $5 dump while his wife took pictures of the ceiling water stains for the file. Nobody had contested the motel going to Ruth and Earl. Nobody had wanted it. That could change fast, once somebody understood what it was. We need our own lawyer, Ruth said. Not the one from the will, somebody who won't call Dwayne first. I know one, Hollis said. Fellow in Fayetteville. Used to do right-of-way work against the state himself, years back. Owes me a favor older than your grandkids. Can he move quick? Earl asked. Quicker than the state moves. Easy. That's not a high bar. Hollis rolled the map carefully, the old curl falling back into itself like it wanted to stay hidden a while longer. I'll call him tonight. You two put this drawer back the way it was and lock the office. Don't tell anybody what's in here. Not the mailwoman, not the Suds Barn crowd, not your own son. Not even Dwayne, Ruth said. Especially not Dwayne, Hollis said. Not till you're sitting across a table from him with paper in your hand instead of hope in your mouth. Ruth looked at the option contract, at Amos's brown, slanted signature, at the seal pressed so hard it had almost torn through 50 years of waiting. Don't sell the $5 place until the road comes asking, she said, quiet. Well, Ruth Bell, Hollis said, using her maiden name like her father used to, the road's not just asking anymore. Way I read this, the road's fixing to pay. Outside, the sign stood empty on its bent post, the paint peeling around the numbers, rooms $5, catching the last of the afternoon light. For the first time since Amos died, it didn't look like a joke to any of them standing in that office. It looked like a man's whole plan, hung up in plain sight for 50 years, waiting on the one daughter he trusted not to sell it cheap. Jean Truitt's office sat above a hardware store on Main Street in Fayetteville, up a staircase that groaned worse than the motel floor. Ruth held the rail. Earl held the folder. Hollis had called ahead. Truitt was already standing when they walked in, a thin man in his 70s with reading glasses pushed up on his head. "Hollis says you've got something interesting," Truitt said. "Interesting's one word for it," Earl said. Ruth set the folder on his desk. She'd wrapped the option contract and the map in a clean pillowcase for the drive, careful as carrying a baby. Truitt unwrapped it like he already knew to be gentle. He read for a long time. Nobody talked. A window unit rattled in the corner, blowing lukewarm air across the desk. "Book 212, page 44, he said finally. "I can pull the courthouse copy myself this afternoon. But if this matches what's recorded, it's good paper." Hollis said the same, Ruth said. "Hollis is usually right." Truitt looked up over his glasses. "You understand what this means for you two, specifically?" "Money," Earl said. Hollis put a number on it. "More than money." Truitt tapped the option contract. "This names Amos Bell as grantor, not you, not your son. The option runs with the land, so whoever holds clean title now steps into Amos's shoes. That's you and Ruth, according to the will." "According to the will," Ruth repeated. "Is there another according?" Truitt leaned back. "Depends on how fast word travels. Right now the courthouse file just shows a corridor review reopened. Nothing flags it as valuable unless somebody actually reads the option and does math like Hollis did." "Somebody like Laurel," Earl muttered. "Your daughter-in-law?" "She notices things," Ruth said, "especially things with dollar signs on them." Truitt nodded slow. "Then here's your real deadline. The Highway Department notice gives you 60 days to confirm current ownership and respond to the corridor review. Miss that window. The file doesn't die, but it gets kicked back into general review. Could sit another year, maybe longer, and if somebody contests who owns the motel before then?" Ruth asked. "Then you've got 2 fights instead of 1. Ownership fight in probate court, value fight with the state. I'd rather you only fight 1. Earl rubbed his knee, the old ache from 30 years of engine work. "So we move quiet. You move quiet, and you move fast," Truitt said. "I can file a confirmation of ownership with the county tomorrow. Costs you $26 in fees. That locks your names to the parcel on public record before anybody else gets a notion to challenge it." "Do it," Ruth said. "I'll need the original deed, not a copy." Ruth reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out the ribbon of keys, and beneath it, folded soft from being carried everywhere, the deed Dwayne had waved off at the lawyer's table without reading. She'd carried it like it might still matter someday. It mattered now. Truitt took it careful, like Hollis had taken the survey tag. "Amos Bell's daughter," he said, reading the name. "Man built himself a quiet little trap, didn't he? He called it a $5 place," Ruth said. Turns out he meant something else. Truitt smiled for the first time since they'd walked in. "Well, Mrs. Mercer, your $5 place is about to cost the state of West Virginia a great deal more than $5. They drove home past 3 in the afternoon, the radio off, Earl's hand steady on the wheel for the first time in weeks. Ruth watched the hills go by, green and worn, same as they'd always been. "You feel any different?" Earl asked. "Some," Ruth said. "Mostly I feel tired. Good tired or bad tired, the kind where you finally get to sit down after carrying something a long way." They came up the gravel drive at Mercer's Rest a little past 4. Hollis's truck was already there, parked crooked by the office like always. He was on the porch step, drinking coffee out of a thermos lid, waiting on them the way he'd waited on plenty of things in his life. "Well," he called out. "Filing tomorrow," Earl said. $26 and it's locked to our name. "Cheap for what it buys you," Hollis said. Ruth's phone rang before she'd even gotten out of the car. She looked at the screen. Laurel. Earl watched her face. "Don't answer it." If I don't, she'll wonder why. She answered. Hello, Laurel. Ruth? Hey. Laurel's voice came out too bright, the kind of bright she used at the salon on customers she didn't like. I was just at the courthouse dropping off some paperwork for Dwayne's truck loan, and I saw your name pop up on a filing board. Something about Route 19? Ruth's stomach dropped, but her voice stayed even. 50 years of church basements had taught her that much. Just some old county notice, Ruth said. Nothing worth talking about. Huh. A pause. Too long. Funny. The girl at the desk said it looked like a highway thing. On your motel. Roads are always doing something out here, Laurel. You know how it is? I guess. Another pause. Well, tell Earl Dwayne says hey. And Ruth, if that place turns out to be worth anything, you'll let us know, right? Family looks out for family. Ruth looked at Earl. Earl looked at Hollis. Hollis looked at his coffee like it had gone cold all at once. Of course, Laurel, Ruth said. Family looks out for family. She hung up. Nobody said anything for a second. A coal truck downshifted out on 19, the engine brake rattling through the lot, same as always. She's already sniffing, Earl said. She's already digging, Hollis said. That girl doesn't call anybody just to say hey. Ruth put the phone in her cardigan pocket next to the ribbon of keys. Then we don't have 60 days, she said. We might have a week. Truitt filed for you tomorrow, Hollis said. That's fast, but it's not fast enough if Dwayne gets a lawyer of his own tonight. He won't get a real one, Earl said. He's never spent $1 on anything he thought he already owned for free. He thought the house was free too, Ruth said. Didn't stop him from taking it. Hollis stood up off the step, joints popping loud enough to hear. Then we go see Truitt again in the morning, early. Before the courthouse even opens its doors, I'll drive you myself. Ruth nodded, but her eyes stayed on the motel behind him. The sign stood over the lot, empty now. Rooms $5 catching the last gold light of the afternoon, same as it had every evening for 50 years. It didn't look empty to her anymore. It looked like it was still doing its job, still standing guard over whatever Amos had asked it to hold. He knew this part too, Ruth said quietly. Daddy did. He knew somebody'd come sniffing the second the ground shifted. Every good secret's got somebody sniffing around it eventually, Hollis said. Question's always whether the folks holding it are ready. Ruth looked at Earl. Earl looked at the sign, then back at her, and for the first time since the will meeting, some of the tired had gone out of his face and something harder had moved in behind it. We're ready, he said. Hollis nodded once. Then let's go make sure the paper says so too. The courthouse didn't open till 9, but Hollis had them on the road by 6:30, headlights cutting through fog still sitting low over Elk Creek. Truitt was already at his desk when they climbed the groaning stairs, coffee going cold beside a stack of forms. Filed the confirmation first thing, he said. County clerk stamped it herself. 9:06 this morning, on the record. That fast? Earl asked. Told you. $26 and a friendly relationship with the clerk's office. Truitt slid a receipt across the desk. Ownership's locked to Earl and Ruth Mercer. Whatever Dwayne wants to try now, he's trying it against a closed door. Ruth folded the receipt twice. Careful, the way she folded everything. She tucked it in her cardigan pocket next to the phone. Feels too easy, she said. Nothing about this has been easy, Hollis said. This part's just fast. They thanked him and drove back toward Briar Hollow with the fog burning off the ridges, sun coming up orange over the tree line. Ruth watched the guardrails go by, thinking about a filing cabinet in Fayetteville that now held her father's name locked next to hers. Then Earl slowed the truck. That's Dwayne's rig, he said. A crew cab pickup, dealer plates still on, sat crooked across the motel's gravel lot. Dwayne leaned against the tailgate, arms crossed, sunglasses pushed up on his head, even though the morning wasn't bright enough yet to need them. Laurel stood beside him, phone already out. Hollis pulled in slow and cut the engine. Let me do the talking first, Ruth said. You never let anybody do the talking first, Earl said. I know, just humor me. They got out. Dwayne pushed off the tailgate. Where you been? He said. Laurel said your phone rang all morning. Fayetteville, Ruth said. Seeing a friend. Funny friend, at 6 in the morning. Some friends keep early hours. Dwayne looked past her at Hollis, then at the motel behind them, the sign standing bare on its post. Laurel found something at the courthouse yesterday. Some highway filing with your names on it. Then this morning there's a second filing. Confirmation of ownership, whatever that means. Same parcel. He said it flat, like he already knew the answer and just wanted to hear her lie. "It means the motel's ours," Ruth said. "Same as it's been since the will." "Ours," Dwayne repeated. "Funny. You never once mentioned a highway filing to me." "Because there wasn't one to mention. Not till it came in the mail." "When'd it come? A few days back?" "A few days." Dwayne's jaw worked. "And you didn't call your own son?" Earl stepped up beside Ruth. "You didn't want the place, Dwayne. You made that plenty clear at the lawyer's table." "I wanted the house," Dwayne said. "I wanted the truck. Nobody in that room wanted a $5 motel with a leaking roof. That's not the same as hiding something." "Nobody's hiding anything," Ruth said. Laurel lowered her phone, stepped closer. "Then why's there a lawyer's card in your coat pocket, Ruth?" "I saw it when you hugged me goodbye at the reading." Ruth's hand went still at her side. She hadn't remembered Laurel noticing that. "A man can hand you a card without you hiring him," Ruth said. "Sure." Laurel's smile didn't move past her mouth. "And a highway department doesn't send a corridor review letter over nothing. I looked that up too." "That's not junk mail, Ruth. That's a state agency getting ready to buy land." Hollis leaned against his truck bed, arms folded, saying nothing yet, letting them talk themselves further out on the limb. "So what if it is?" Earl said. "It's our land. Deed says Mercer, R and Mercer, E. Not Dwayne, not Laurel." "For now," Dwayne said. "For always," Ruth said. "Your father saw to that a long time before you were born." Dwayne's face changed at that, something flickering behind his eyes, quick and gone. "Granddad," he said, "this is about Granddad Amos, isn't it? All that surveying he used to talk about at Thanksgiving. Nobody ever listened past the second sentence." "Some of us listened," Ruth said. Dwayne looked at the sign. Rooms $5 catching morning light same as it had for 50 years, and something in his face hardened back up. "Doesn't matter who listened," he said. "Way I see it, if this place turns out to be worth real money, that's still family money. Same family that split everything else 3 ways at that table. You can't just cut me and Laurel out because you got lucky with a mailbox. Nobody's cutting you out of what's rightfully yours," Ruth said. "You already took the house, the truck, the account." "That was the split, Dwayne. You said so yourself right there at the table. You said, 'Leave us the $5 dump.' I was joking. Weren't laughing when I looked at your face," Earl said. Dwayne's jaw tightened. He glanced at Laurel. Something passed between them, quick, practiced, like a hand signal worked out in advance. "Fine," Dwayne said. "You want to play it that way. I talked to a fella yesterday. Works for a title company down in Beckley. Says a family member can petition probate to revisit distribution if new information changes the value of the estate materially." "That's a real thing, Mom. That's not me making it up." Ruth felt her stomach drop, but she kept her face still. 53 years married to a mechanic had taught her not to flinch at the sound of an engine about to throw a rod. "A title company clerk," Hollis said, finally speaking, "is not a lawyer, Dwayne." Dwayne looked at him like he'd forgotten Hollis was standing there. "Nobody asked you, Hollis." "Somebody ought to," Hollis said. "Because that fella's half right and half dangerous. Probate can get reopened on material new facts. That part's true, but it takes a filing, a judge, and proof the original distribution was made in ignorance or bad faith. You knew what this motel was when you passed on it. Says so practically in your own joke. That's not proof of anything." "It's a start," Hollis said, "and your mother's filing beat you to the courthouse by about 3 hours this morning. Judges don't love it when the son who called something worthless in front of witnesses turns around wanting a piece once it isn't." Dwayne's face went red at the ears, the way it used to when he was a boy caught red-handed and looking for a way to argue his way out of it anyway. "We'll see what a real lawyer says," he said. "You do that," Ruth said. Her voice stayed even, but something in it had firmed up since the will meeting, some old steel finally surfacing after 53 years underwater. "Get yourself a real one, not a fella from a title company, and bring your truck papers with you since I hear you and Laurel already picked out a crew cab." Dwayne's eyes flicked to Laurel. Laurel looked away first. "How'd you know about the truck?" Dwayne said. "Small town," Ruth said. "Word travels faster than gravel dust." For a second nobody spoke. A coal truck went by out on 19, brakes hissing into the curve, same sound the sign used to answer with a rattle. The sign didn't rattle now, it just stood there, quiet, holding its ground the way it had for 50 years. Laurel broke first. "We just want what's fair, Ruth. That's all this is. Fair already happened, Ruth said. At that table. You picked the house. Dwayne picked the truck. I picked up a set of keys nobody else in that room would touch. Now you want to pick again because the second pick turned out heavier than the first. That's not fair, Laurel. That's just wanting. Dwayne opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the motel a long moment, at the rusted sign, at the boarded window of the room Ruth and Earl had cleaned out days before. Something crossed his face that might have been shame, might have just been arithmetic. We'll talk to a lawyer, he said again, quieter this time, a real one. Then we'll see. You do that, Earl said, and when you do, bring him to Gene Truitt's office in Fayetteville. Save everybody the drive twice. Dwayne didn't answer. He walked to his truck, dealer plates still bright and unregistered, and Laurel followed a step behind, phone already back up to her ear before she'd even climbed in. The truck pulled out fast, gravel spitting behind the tires, and turned onto 19 toward town. Nobody spoke until the sound of the engine faded past the bridge. Well, Hollis said, that's the sniffing done. Now it's the digging. Ruth let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding since Fayetteville. He's going to find somebody who tells him what he wants to hear, somebody who says he can still get a piece. Probably, Hollis said. Questions whether that somebody knows real estate law or just knows how to bill by the hour. Earl looked at the sign, at rooms $5 catching the climbing sun, and something in his shoulders had straightened since the drive up that morning. Let him find whoever he wants, Earl said. We got the paper. We got the map. We got a name in Amos's own hand on a state seal 50 years old. He looked at Ruth. First time in my life I felt like the ground under us was actually ours. Ruth reached for his hand, the way she had 1,000 times outside church basements and hospital waiting rooms and a lawyer's office that still smelled like burnt coffee in her memory. It always was ours, she said. We just didn't know it yet. Hollis climbed back into his truck, started the engine, then leaned out the window. I'll call Truitt, he said. Tell him Dwayne's shopping for a lawyer. Give him a head start figuring out what kind of fight that boy's fixing to bring. You think he'll actually find one? Ruth asked. Fayetteville's full of them, Hollis said. Questions whether he finds one willing to take a case built on a joke he told in front of witnesses. He shook his head, put the truck in reverse. Some men dig themselves a hole and then go looking for a lawyer to argue the hole was somebody else's idea. He pulled out, gravel crunching under the tires same as Dwayne's had, and left Earl and Ruth standing alone in the lot, the sign above them holding its silence, the morning sun climbing higher over Route 19. The letter came by certified mail on a Tuesday, delivered by a mail carrier who made Ruth sign twice because her hand shook the first time. State of West Virginia. Department of Highways, District 10. Ruth read the return address 3 times before she opened it. Earl stood behind her at the kitchen table in the little house they'd kept, coffee going cold between them. Open it, Earl said. Standing there staring, won't tell you what's inside. Ruth slit the envelope with a butter knife. Inside was a single page, state seal at the top, dense with numbers. Preliminary appraisal, she read. Corridor acquisition, parcel 441. Estimated fair market value plus relocation and business loss damages. She stopped, looked up at Earl. How much? Earl said. $2,300,000. Earl sat down hard in the chair across from her, like his knees had finally given out for a reason worth giving out for. That's more than Hollis said, he said. Hollis said 1.8. This says 2.3. Ruth set the page down flat on the table, smoothing it with her palm the way she smoothed everything. State must have priced in the business loss. 50 years of a motel, even a $5 one, counts for something on paper. Earl reached for the letter, read it himself, lips moving over the numbers like he was checking a torque spec. Call Hollis, he said. He'll want to see this. Hollis came within the hour, boots still dusty from his own yard. He read the letter twice, standing, not sitting, like he needed to stay on his feet for a number that size. 2-3, he said. That's higher than I figured, and I don't figure low. He set the letter down. That's not an offer yet. That's the state showing its hand before it makes one. But it tells you something. Tells us what? Earl said. Tells you they already know what they're buying, and they know it's not cheap. Hollis tapped the page. This is the number Dwayne's going to hear about, one way or another, and once he hears it, that boy's not going to sit still. Ruth folded the letter along a new crease, careful, the way she folded the deed, the map, everything worth keeping. He already didn't sit still, she said. He said he was getting a lawyer. Then we'll know soon enough what kind. They knew by Thursday. Jean Truitt called the motel office phone, the old rotary one Ruth had cleaned the dust off but never expected to ring again. It rang anyway, loud and startling in the empty lot. Ruth picked it up on the third ring. Mercer's Rest. "Ruth, it's Jean. You might want to sit down." "I'm already sitting," Ruth said, which was true, on an overturned bucket by the window, but she stood up anyway, out of old habit, the way you stood for bad news even when nobody could see you do it. "Dwayne retained a lawyer," Truitt said, "fella named Perkins out of Beckley. Filed a petition this morning to reopen the estate's distribution. Says new information came to light after the original agreement that materially changes the estate's value, and the original split should be revisited in light of it." "That's exactly what he said he'd do," Ruth said. "He said it. Perkins wrote it up proper, though. This isn't a title clerk's guess anymore. It's a real filing with a real docket number." Earl had come up beside her, close enough to hear Truitt's voice through the receiver, and his jaw had gone tight the way it used to when a bolt wouldn't turn. "What's it mean?" Earl said, loud enough for Truitt to hear him too. "It means a judge is going to look at it," Truitt said. "Probate court's already set a hearing. Third Monday next month, 9 a.m. Fayetteville Courthouse, same building where we filed your confirmation. Judge Ann Caldwell presiding." Ruth felt something settle in her chest, heavy and certain, like a door closing on a room she'd already decided to leave. "That's not much time," she said. "It's enough time if we use it right," Truitt said. "Perkins is going to argue the original distribution was made without full knowledge of the estate's value, and that Dwayne and Laurel should get a share of whatever the motel's now worth. He's going to say your children only agreed to split it because everyone thought the motel was worthless." "They said it was worthless," Ruth said. "Said it in front of half the county at that table." "That's exactly what we're going to remind the judge," Truitt said. "But Ruth, I need you and Earl in my office before that hearing. Every piece of paper, the deed, the highway filing, the courthouse confirmation, and whatever else Hollis has been keeping in that head of his. I want the judge to see it laid out before Perkins gets a chance to make it sound complicated." "We'll bring the map," Ruth said. A pause on the line. "What map?" "The one Amos hid," Ruth said. "The option Daddy signed with the state back in '74. Hollis says it's the whole reason the frontage is worth what it's worth." Truitt was quiet a second. "Bring that first," he said. "Bring that before anything else." They hung up. Earl looked at Ruth, and for a second, neither of them said anything, the old rotary phone still humming faint on its cradle between them. "Third Monday," Earl said. "That's not 60 days. That's not even 30. "It's enough," Ruth said, echoing Truitt without meaning to. Hollis's truck pulled in 20 minutes later, like he'd known before they called him, the way he always seemed to know things about that lot before anybody told him outright. "Judge Caldwell," he said, when Ruth told him. "I know her a little. Fair judge. Doesn't like theater, doesn't like folks wasting her morning. That cuts for you, not against you." "How's that?" Earl asked. "Because your side's got paper," Hollis said. "Dwayne's side has got a joke he told in front of witnesses and a lawyer trying to talk his way around it. Judges don't like paper being out-talked. They like paper winning." Ruth looked past him at the sign, Rooms $5 still standing over the lot, its back panel patched now where Earl had screwed it shut again after they'd pulled the tin box free. "He's gonna sit in that same building," Ruth said. "Same building where he laughed at us." "Different room, probably," Hollis said, "but same floor, same courthouse that already stamped your name to that parcel." He looked at her. "Funny how that works out." "Not funny," Ruth said, "just fitting." Earl rubbed his knee, the old ache flaring the way it always did before weather or bad news, sometimes both at once. "Perkins is going to come at this hard," he said. "Lawyer like that, working a case this size, he's not doing it for free." "No," Hollis said, "which means Dwayne's already spent money he doesn't have on a case he might lose. That tells you something, too." "Tells you he believes it's worth fighting for," Ruth said. "Tells you he's desperate," Hollis said. "Man with a truck loan and a new house and a wife wanting to expand a salon doesn't hire a Beckley lawyer for a maybe. He hired one because Laurel told him $2.3 million was sitting in a motel he already gave away for a joke." Ruth walked to the sign, put her hand flat against the cool metal, over the patched panel, over the place where the rattle used to live. "Daddy," she said, quiet, not quite a prayer. "You said the road would come asking. Didn't say my own son would come asking right behind it." Nobody answered her, because nobody could, but Earl came and stood beside her anyway, his hand finding hers the way it had for 53 years, steady even when nothing else was. "Third Monday," Earl said again, like saying it enough times might shrink it down to something manageable. "Third Monday," Hollis agreed. "And we'll be in that room ready, with the map, the option, the deed, and every scrap of paper your daddy left you to fight with. Let Perkins bring his theater. We'll bring the truth, notarized." Ruth folded her hand tighter around Earl's, looking out at Route 19 where a coal truck rumbled past, brakes hissing into the curve same as always, same sound the sign used to answer with a rattle before Earl found what was hiding behind it. "Then we'd better get that map somewhere safe," she said, "and get ourselves ready to stand in a room and say it out loud." Truett's office smelled the same as it had the first time, burnt coffee and old paper. This time Ruth brought a banker's box instead of a manila folder. She set it on his desk like she was setting down a stone. "That's everything," she said. "Deed, map, option, survey tag. Hollis's letter too." Truett lifted the lid, looked inside, whistled low. "You've been busy." "We've had time," Earl said. "Didn't have much else to do but get ready." Truett spread the papers across his desk in rows, like a man laying out cards before a big hand. The highway option first, then the survey tag in its plastic sleeve, then the state's appraisal letter, $2,300,000 printed plain across the top. "Judge Caldwell's going to want this in order," Truett said, "chronological. Amos's option first, dated 74. Then the will, then the family split, then the state's letter, then Dwayne's petition." "You think that's enough?" Earl asked. "It's not about enough," Truett said. "It's about clean. Perkins is going to try to make this messy, confuse the timeline, make it sound like you two hid something from your own children." Ruth's mouth went tight. "We didn't hide anything. We didn't even know." "I believe you," Truett said. "Question is whether Judge Caldwell does, and she will once she sees the dates line up." He was still talking when his office phone rang. He picked it up, listened, and his face changed in a way Ruth had learned to read over the last few weeks. "That was Perkins," he said, hanging up. "Dwayne's lawyer." "What did he want?" Earl said. "He wants to talk settlement, before the hearing." Ruth sat forward. "Settlement of what?" "There's nothing to settle. It's our motel." "He's offering to drop the petition," Truett said, "if you agree to give Dwayne and Laurel a quarter of whatever the state pays. He's calling it fair recognition of family contribution." "Contribution," Ruth said, like the word tasted bad. "Dwayne never lifted a finger on that motel his whole life. Not one nail, not one broom." 25% of 2.3, Truett said, doing the math out loud, comes to about $575,000. That's what Perkins is asking you to hand over to make this go away quiet. Earl's jaw worked. "And if we say no, then it goes in front of Caldwell like we planned," Truett said. "Perkins is testing you, seeing if you'll pay to avoid the courtroom." Ruth looked at the papers spread across the desk. The option, the tag, the deed. 50 years of her father's quiet work laid out like a hand of solitaire finally coming together. "Tell him no," she said. "You sure?" Truett said. "It'd save you the hearing, save some stress on Earl's heart too." Earl snorted. "My heart's fine, long as nobody hands my son $500,000 for calling me a fool at a lawyer's table." "Tell him no," Ruth said again. "Tell him we'll see him and his client the third Monday. And tell him to bring his own calculator, because ours already added it up." Truett smiled. Small, the kind of smile a man gives when a client says exactly what he'd hoped they'd say. "I'll call him back this afternoon." They drove home past the Dollar General, past the turnoff for Elk Creek Bridge, back to the little house with the porch light Ruth still left burning some nights out of habit. The motel sign stood off in the distance from the road, rooms $5 catching the last of the afternoon sun. Laurel's car was already in the gravel lot when they pulled up. She was standing by the office door, arms crossed, wearing a blouse too nice for a motel visit, like she dressed for court instead of gravel. Ruth got out of the truck slow, feeling the old ache in her hip the humidity always brought on. "Laurel," Ruth said, "didn't expect you out here alone. Dwayne doesn't know I came," Laurel said. "I wanted to talk to you woman to woman, without the lawyers." Earl came around the truck, stood a step behind Ruth, quiet, the way he did when he wanted Ruth to lead. "Talk then," Ruth said. "This is tearing the family apart, Ruth. You know that." Laurel's voice had gone soft, the tone she used at the salon on customers she was about to upsell. Dwayne's not sleeping. He feels like his own mother's turned against him. His own mother offered him the house, Ruth said. The truck, $64,000. He turned around and called what was left a $5 dump, laughing in front of the whole family. "People say things," Laurel said. "It was a joke." "It's always a joke," Ruth said, "right up until the joke turns out to be worth $2 million. Then it's family." Laurel's composure slipped, just at the edges. "You don't need all of it, Ruth. You're 74 years old. What are you and Earl going to do with $2 million? Live," Ruth said. "Fix the roof. Pay Earl's doctor without counting pennies first. Maybe help somebody who actually asks instead of demanding. We're your children." "You're grown," Ruth said. "Grown children who already picked their share? I don't begrudge you the house, Laurel. I don't begrudge Dwayne the truck. But you don't get to come back for a second helping, because the first one didn't turn out to be the biggest plate." Laurel's eyes went bright, angry now instead of soft. "Perkins says the judge might see it different." "Perkins can say whatever Dwayne's paying him to say," Ruth said. "Judge Caldwell's going to see dates. She's going to see a deed with my name on it and a will your own family signed, and a highwayman named Hollis Kincaid who's going to explain what my daddy built into that sign before either of us was born." Laurel looked past Ruth toward the motel, toward the sign standing quiet in the lot, and something crossed her face that might have been calculation, might have been the first real flicker of understanding that this fight was already lost. "He's not going to let this go," Laurel said. "Just so you know. Whatever happens Monday, Dwayne's not going to let this go." "Then he can keep not letting it go," Ruth said, "on his own time with his own money, because Perkins doesn't work for free, and Dwayne's already spent what he doesn't have chasing something that was never his." Laurel didn't answer. She got back in her car, gravel spitting thin under the tires, same as it had under Dwayne's truck weeks before, and pulled out onto 19 without looking back. Earl let out a breath. "That's the second one come sniffing around trying to talk you out of it." "Won't be the last," Ruth said, "but it'll be the last one that gets an audience." They went inside the little house that evening, and Ruth laid the banker's box on the kitchen table, checked every paper twice, the way she used to check a church supper count before the doors opened. Earl took his pills at 7, same as always, water glass beside the bottle, Ruth watching without seeming to watch. "Third Monday's coming fast," Earl said. "It's coming exactly on time," Ruth said, "same as it was always going to." She thought of her father then, the way she had 100 times since the sign gave up its secret, Amos Bell with his slow hands and his slower words, telling her decades ago not to sell the $5 place until the road came asking. The road had asked. Her own son had come asking right behind it, and now a judge in Fayetteville was going to have to decide which asking counted for something. Earl reached over, took her hand across the table, same as he'd done outside the lawyer's office the day this all started. "You scared?" he asked. "No," Ruth said. "Just ready. Been ready a long time, I think. Longer than I knew." Outside, past the porch light, past the dark stretch of Route 19, the motel sign stood in the last of the evening. Rooms $5 holding its ground under a sky going the color of a bruise healing, and somewhere past that, a hearing waited with a docket number and a judge's calendar, 3 weeks off and closing fast. Truitt called again 2 days later, and this time his voice had a different weight to it. Careful, like he was picking each word before he let it out. "I need you to hear something from the highway department first," he said, "before Perkins gets a hold of it and twists it." "Go on," Ruth said. "Fella named Odell Marsh, right-of-way division, called my office this morning. Said the state's purchase offer on your frontage is on administrative hold." Ruth's stomach dropped an inch. "Hold? Since when?" "Since Dwayne's petition landed on a judge's desk," Truitt said. "State won't finalize a land purchase while ownership's disputed in probate court. Doesn't matter that you hold the deed clean right now. Long as somebody's contesting who gets the money, Marsh's office sits on its hands." Earl had picked up the second line in the kitchen, the old habit from 30 years of two-phone households. So Dwayne filing that petition, he said, "It's not just about the money anymore. It's holding up the whole sale." "That's right," Truitt said. Marsh told me the state's got a fiscal year deadline on bypass land acquisitions. If this isn't cleared up in 60 days, the funding earmarked for your parcel could get reassigned to a different phase of the project. Ruth felt her hand tighten on the phone cord, an old reflex from decades of taking bad news standing at this same counter. So if Dwayne drags this out, she said, the money could just disappear. Not disappear, Truitt said, but delay. Maybe years. Maybe get folded into a later phase that never comes. He wouldn't care, Earl said, low, mostly to Ruth. Dwayne doesn't want the money slow. He wants it now in his pocket before that truck loan comes due. Which is exactly why we need Monday to go clean, Truitt said. Judge Caldwell rules fast when a case is clear. She sees the paper, she sees the timeline, she can resolve this from the bench same day. That keeps Marsh's office moving. And if Perkins asks for a continuance, Ruth said, that's my worry, Truitt admitted. Man like Perkins, if he sees he's losing, he might ask the judge for more time. Says he needs to review new evidence, hire an appraiser of his own, string it out. Can he do that? He can ask, Truitt said. Doesn't mean Caldwell grants it, but we need to walk in there Monday looking like delay helps nobody but Dwayne. That means every paper airtight, every date accounted for, nothing left for Perkins to grab onto and stretch. Ruth hung up slow, set the receiver back in its cradle, and looked at Earl across the kitchen table where the banker's box still sat, its lid slightly askew from being opened and closed so many times these last weeks. 60 days, she said. Fiscal year deadline. We don't have 60 days to spare on foolishness, Earl said. We've got till Monday to make sure there isn't a crack anywhere Perkins can put a crowbar in. They spent that evening going through the box again, papers spread across the table under the kitchen light, the same light Ruth's mother used to darn socks under decades back before any of this. Earl handled the deed like a man handling a torque wrench he trusted, careful, sure of his own grip. Ruth handled the folder with the map different, slower, the way she'd handled her father's things after the funeral, back when everything he'd touched still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and diesel. It was in that folder, tucked behind the survey plat, that she found the note. A single sheet, folded in thirds, her father's handwriting on the outside, just her name. Ruth. Not Ruthie, which he'd called her as a girl, but Ruth, plain, the way he wrote things he meant seriously. Earl, she said, and something in her voice brought him around the table fast. What is it? There's something else in here. I never saw it before. She unfolded it slow, careful of the crease lines gone soft with age, and read it out loud because Earl's eyes weren't what they used to be, and because some part of her needed to hear her father's words out in the room instead of just in her head. Ruth, if you're reading this, the road's finally come and I'm not here to see it. I signed that option in '74 because Hollis Kincaid told me straight what was coming, years before anybody else knew. I could have sold out then for quick money, like half the men on this road did. I didn't. I built the motel instead, kept it running, kept the land under my name, because the day the bypass came, I wanted my daughter holding the paper, not some stranger who bought me out cheap. Don't let anybody tell you it's just a $5 motel. It was never about the $5, it was about you still standing here when the road finally asked. Ruth's hands were shaking a little by the time she finished. Not from grief exactly, something closer to recognition. The feeling of a door you'd walked past your whole life, finally opening onto a room you always somehow knew was there. Earl didn't say anything right away. He reached over, took the letter gentle out of her hands, read it again himself, slower, his lips moving faint over the words, like a man checking a measurement twice. He knew, Earl said finally, 50 years, and he knew this exact day was coming. He didn't know the day, Ruth said, just that it would, same thing, near enough. She folded the letter back along its old creases, same as she'd folded the deed that first day at Truitt's office. Careful, precise, a woman who respected paper because paper was sometimes the only thing that held the truth steady when people didn't. This goes to court Monday too, she said. Truitt's gonna want it. You sure you want strangers reading your daddy's letter? I want Judge Caldwell to hear what he meant, Ruth said, not what Dwayne says he meant, what he actually wrote down, in his own hand, years before any of us knew to listen. Hollis came by the next afternoon, boots crunching gravel same as always, and Ruth showed him the letter before she showed him anything else. He read it standing in the motel office doorway, the light behind him catching the gray in his hair, and when he finished, he didn't hand it back right away. He just stood there a second looking past it at nothing in particular. "He never told me he wrote something like that," Hollis said. "Told me plenty else. Not this." "You said he knew what was coming," Ruth said. "Long before anybody else." "I told him myself," Hollis said. 73, maybe early 74. I was still young in the job, but I'd seen the corridor studies. Told Amos, quiet, off the books, that Route 19's bypass would run right through his frontage someday. Wasn't supposed to say a word. Could have lost my job for it. Why'd you tell him then?" "Because he'd loaned me tools and time for years without ever asking for a thing back," Hollis said. "Because it seemed like a decent thing to do, tell an old friend before the county came in and took his land for pennies, the way it did plenty of others up this road." He looked at the letter again. Didn't figure he'd build a whole strategy around it. Thought he'd just sell early, take his money, move on like everybody else. "He never did things the easy way," Ruth said. "No," Hollis agreed, "he surely didn't." He handed the letter back, careful, both hands. "The way you hand somebody something you understand is worth more than paper. I'll write an affidavit," he said. "Say what I know about the corridor study, about telling Amos, about the survey tag, and my initials on it. Sign it in front of a notary before Monday. Give Caldwell somebody who was there, not just documents saying so." "Would that hold up?" Earl asked. "It's not the deciding thing," Hollis said. "The map's the deciding thing. The option itself, state seal and all. But a live witness who watched it happen, carries weight paper alone, doesn't. Judges like a person in the room they can look at and believe." Ruth thought about that, about her father sitting somewhere on the other side of all this paper, a man who'd trusted a young road foreman's whispered warning enough to spend the next 40 years quietly protecting a plot of land nobody else believed was worth protecting. He held on to this place 40 years for a road that might never have come, she said. "That's a long time to trust a hunch." "Wasn't a hunch to him," Hollis said. "It was a promise somebody made him once, and Amos was the kind of man who figured a promise was as good as a deed, long as the person making it meant it." Earl looked at the sign out past the window, rooms $5, catching the last gray light of the afternoon. Its patched panel closed tight now over the space where the tin box used to hide. "Monday," he said. "Feels like the whole thing's been leading to one room in one courthouse." "It has," Hollis said. "Every bit of it. The tag, the key, the drawer, the map, now this letter. All of it's just been getting ready to walk through that door together." Ruth set the letter carefully back inside its folder, laid it on top of the deed, on top of the option, on top of everything else her father had trusted her to carry, without ever explaining why until now. Outside, a coal truck downshifted into the curve by the old bridge, brakes hissing the same way they always had, and for the first time in weeks the sound didn't feel like something to brace against. It felt like a clock counting down toward Monday, toward a courthouse floor Ruth had already stood on once with a folder of papers nobody expected to matter. This time, she wouldn't be standing there quiet, letting other people decide what her father's life had been worth. This time, she'd be the one reading his words out loud, in front of the son who'd laughed at them, in front of a judge who hadn't yet, and in front of whatever was left of a family that still had a chance, however small, of remembering what Amos Bell had actually meant by patience. Dwayne came himself 2 days before the hearing. No truck this time. He drove Laurel's sedan, parked crooked by the motel office, and got out slow, like a man walking into a dentist's chair. Ruth saw him from the window and didn't move to open the door. Earl did. "Dwayne," Earl said. "Dad." Dwayne stood on the gravel, hands jammed in his jacket pockets. "Can we talk? Just us." "Ruth hears everything I hear," Earl said. "Been that way 53 years. Not changing it for you." Dwayne's jaw worked. He came in anyway, stood by the counter where the old registration book still sat closed, dust thin on its cover. "Perkins has an idea," Dwayne said. "Might not even need probate to drag out." "Say it," Ruth said. "He wants to file for a competency review." "On you, Dad." "Says if a doctor finds you're not sharp enough to manage property, the court can put someone else in charge of the estate. Temporary guardian." The room went quiet. Earl's hand found the counter edge. "Someone else," Ruth said. "Meaning Dwayne." "Meaning whoever the court appoints," Dwayne said. "Might not even be me. Perkins says it don't matter who. Just freezes everything till it's sorted." Earl's voice came out flat, No shaking it. I changed brake lines on state trucks 40 years, Dwayne. I can still read a torque spec off a bolt. You want to send a doctor out here? Send him. I'll answer every question he's got. It ain't really about whether you pass, Dwayne said. It's about buying time. Perkins figures if a competency motion's sitting on the docket, Judge Caldwell might push Monday back. Might, Ruth said. Or she might look at a 76-year-old man who's never missed a doctor's appointment, never missed a pill, still balances his own checkbook, and ask why his son waited till 3 days before a probate hearing to suddenly worry about his father's mind. Dwayne looked at the floor. I didn't say I agreed with it, but you let Perkins file it anyway, Ruth said. I haven't signed anything yet. Yet, Ruth repeated. Dwayne's eyes came up, and for a second something moved behind them, close to shame, gone as fast as it came. The truck payment's due Friday, he said. $2,000 a month, Mom. I already put a deposit down before any of this happened. Bank's not going to care whose fault it is. No, Ruth said. Banks generally don't. I need something to show them. Some kind of settlement, even a partial one, before Friday. There's no settlement, Ruth said. There's a hearing Monday. If you want money before Friday, sell the truck back. I can't sell it back. It's already titled. Then you've got a problem, Ruth said, same as anybody who spends money they don't have yet. Earl stepped up beside her. Son, I'll say this once. You file that competency thing, you're not slowing us down. You're handing Judge Caldwell a reason to distrust every paper Perkins puts in front of her after. Judges remember who waste their time. Dwayne didn't answer that. He looked past them, out the window at the sign standing in the lot, rooms $5 catching the gray afternoon. That thing's going to be worth more than the house, he said, quiet, almost to himself. Laurel told me the number. Almost $2 million. Closer to that every day, Ruth said. I grew up in that house, Dwayne said. Not this place. I never even wanted this place. No, Ruth said. You wanted the number. Once you heard it. He didn't argue that either. He stood there a second longer, then turned and walked back out to the car, gravel crunching under boots that used to run this same lot as a boy, back before any of it needed explaining. Ruth watched the sedan pull out onto 19. He'll file it, Earl said. Maybe, Ruth said. Doesn't matter much now. Doesn't matter? Call Truitt, Ruth said. Tell him to get your doctor's records ready, current as this year, and call Dr. Ferris's office. Ask if he'll write a letter. Plain language. Say you're sound of mind. We put that in the file before Perkins even gets his motion typed up. Earl looked at her a long moment, something like pride creeping into it despite the tiredness underneath. You've been 3 steps ahead of every one of them since the day that lawyer read the will. Somebody had to be, Ruth said. Your daddy taught me to count a church supper twice before opening the doors. Man learns to count ahead, or he runs out halfway through the line. Truitt called back within the hour, and this time he sounded almost amused. Odell Marsh called me again too, he said. Said if Monday goes the way we expect, his office can move fast, get your relocation, and purchase paperwork filed inside 2 weeks. Wants it off his desk before the fiscal year closes. And the competency thing, Ruth asked. Perkins hasn't filed it yet, Truitt said. I already reached out to Dr. Ferris myself, got him agreeable to write something plain. If Perkins tries it Monday morning, we hand Judge Caldwell a letter from Earl's own physician before Perkins finishes his sentence. Good, Ruth said. There's one more thing, Truitt said, and his voice dropped a register. Caldwell's clerk called to confirm the docket. Said the courtroom's the big one downtown, not the small hearing room we used before. Word's gotten around town about this case. Might be more folks watching than we figured. Ruth looked over at Earl, who was already reaching for his pill bottle. 7 o'clock, same as always, water glass waiting. Let them watch, Ruth said. Be good for people to see how this ends. That night she laid out her clothes for Monday, same as she used to lay out Sunday clothes for church when the kids were small. Careful. Nothing left to the last minute. The teal cardigan, pressed. Her walking boots cleaned of gravel dust. The banker's box sat by the door, lid latched now. Every paper inside it accounted for twice. Earl came and stood beside her, looking down at the box like it was something bigger than paper. Feels strange, he said, putting your whole life in a box like that. It's not my whole life, Ruth said. It's just the proof of it. The life's already done, Earl. This is just what we carry in to show them we lived it right. Outside, past the porch light, Route 19 ran quiet in the dark. And somewhere down that road, in a courthouse with a docket number, And a big room instead of a small one? Monday was already waiting, closer now than it had ever been. The courthouse in Briar Hollow sat 2 blocks off Main, brick gone dark with 100 years of coal dust, and Monday morning the big courtroom was full before 9. Ruth counted the rows without meaning to. Half the church basement crowd, the Dollar General manager, a woman from the diner who used to laugh loudest about the $5 dump. Ruth wore the teal cardigan. Earl wore his good jacket, the one from Amos's funeral, and carried the banker's box himself. Wouldn't let her take it. "You don't have to carry that," Ruth said. "I've carried heavier," Earl said. "Man that changes brake drums 40 years can carry a box of paper." Dwayne sat across the aisle with Laurel and Perkins. He didn't look at them walking in. Laurel did once quick, then looked away. Judge Caldwell came in at 9 sharp black robe, reading glasses pushed up on gray hair. She looked younger than her voice sounded on the phone. "Estate of Amos Bell," the clerk said. "Probate matter," continued. Perkins stood first. "Your Honor, before we proceed, opposing counsel should know we've prepared a motion regarding Mr. Mercer's capacity to—" "Filed?" Judge Caldwell asked. "Not yet filed, Your Honor, but then it's not before me." She looked at him over the glasses. "You had 2 days' notice of this hearing, Counselor. Bring me a filed motion or don't bring me anything." Truitt stood, calm, a folder already in his hand. "For the record, Your Honor, Mr. Mercer's physician, Dr. Ferris, provided a current letter attesting to full competency. Dated Friday. I'll enter it now in case." "Noted," Judge Caldwell said. "Sit down, Mr. Perkins." Perkins sat. Dwayne's jaw tightened. Ruth watched Laurel's hand find his sleeve quiet, like she already knew this morning wasn't going the way Perkins promised. Truitt rose again. "Your Honor, this hearing concerns disposition of real property under the will of Amos Bell, specifically the motel known as Mercer's Rest, on Route 19 near Elk Creek. There's also a pending Highway Department filing naming that property for bypass acquisition. We'd like to enter both into the record. Proceed." Truitt opened the banker's box himself now, careful, and laid the papers out one at a time on the table, the same table where Dwayne had laughed 8 weeks back. The deed, the survey plat, the sealed highway option, state seal still bright at the corner. "This option was recorded in 1974, Truitt said, signed by Amos Bell, granting the state exclusive right to purchase the full motel frontage when the Route 19 bypass corridor was finalized. It was never rescinded. It transfers with the property under the will, which leaves the motel and its land to Earl and Ruth Mercer." Perkins stood. "Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity of a 50-year-old document with no witness to its execution." "There is a witness," Truitt said. He called Hollis. Hollis walked up slow, boots quiet on the tile floor, and took the oath like a man who'd sworn to plenty in his life and never once broken it. He wore a clean shirt, collar buttoned, hair combed flat. "State your name and occupation," Truitt said. "Hollis Kincaid. Retired county road foreman. 31 years with the Highway Department. Do you recognize this document?" Hollis looked at the option map a long moment. The room stayed quiet enough Ruth could hear the clock above the bench ticking. "I do," Hollis said. "I surveyed that frontage myself in '73. Those are my initials on the tag HK, same tag that was hidden behind that motel sign for 50 years. I told Amos Bell, off the record, that the bypass corridor would run through his land someday. He asked the state to draw him an option instead of selling out. I witnessed him sign it. And the value of that frontage today? Full acquisition, plus relocation and business loss damages," Hollis said. "I'd put it north of $1.8 million. Maybe higher, once appraisal's done." A sound moved through the gallery, low, quick, gone fast. Dwayne's face didn't move, but his hand did, closing slow on the arm of his chair. "Objection," Perkins said. "Speculative valuation from a non-expert. Mr. Kincaid spent 3 decades pricing right-of-way for this state," Judge Caldwell said. "That's expertise, Counselor. Overruled." Truitt held up one more sheet. "There's also this, Your Honor. A letter from Amos Bell to his daughter, found among the estate papers, dated some years back, unaddressed to any court, but relevant to intent." "Read it," Judge Caldwell said. Truitt handed it to Ruth instead. "I think it should be read by the person he wrote it to." Ruth stood. Her hands didn't shake this time. She unfolded the letter along its old creases and read it out loud, slow, clear, the same words she'd read at her own kitchen table. He signed that option because a friend warned him what was coming, years before anybody else knew, she read. He could have sold out cheap like everybody else on that road. He didn't. He built the motel instead, kept the land under his name. Because the day the bypass came, he wanted his daughter holding the paper, not some stranger who bought him out cheap. She looked up. He wrote, "It was never about the $5. It was about me still standing here when the road finally asked." Nobody in the gallery said anything for a second. Judge Caldwell took her glasses off, cleaned them once on her sleeve, put them back on. "Mr. Perkins," she said, "does the estate dispute the validity of the deed, the option, or the will's disposition of this property?" Perkins looked at Duane. Duane looked at the floor. "No, Your Honor," Perkins said. "Then the court confirms the motel and its underlying land passed to Earl and Ruth Mercer per the will, free of any competing claim." She tapped her pen once on the bench. "The highway option stands as recorded. Any acquisition proceeds go to the property owners. That's Mr. and Mrs. Mercer." Ruth sat back down slow. Earl reached over, took her hand, held it under the table where nobody could see how hard. Duane stood up before Perkins could stop him. "Your Honor, if I could just say, this matter is closed, Mr. Mercer," Judge Caldwell said. "Whatever you'd like to say it outside my courtroom." He stood there a second longer, and Ruth watched something in his face give way. Not all at once, more like a wall losing its last brick. He looked at her, and for the first time since the will reading, he looked like a boy again, not a man with a truck payment due. "Take the house," Ruth said. Quiet, not unkind, just tired of carrying words nobody else would say first. "Take the truck, take the account. But you left us the $5 dump, Duane. Turns out it was never the dump." She stood, folded the letter back along its creases, and walked out past him into the hallway, Earl beside her, the banker's box lighter somehow, though it weighed the same as it had walking in. Outside, the gallery crowd spilled onto the courthouse steps, and the Dollar General manager was already telling somebody near the parking lot what she'd just watched. Ruth didn't stop to hear it. She stood on the top step in the July sun, Earl's hand still in hers, and looked down Main Street toward the highway she couldn't see from here, but knew was running quiet, same as always, toward Elk Creek and the motel and whatever came next. Ruth stood on the courthouse steps a long minute, letting the sun sit on her shoulders. Then she and Earl walked down to the car, slow, his hand still holding hers. They didn't talk much on the drive back to Route 19, radio off, windows cracked. Somewhere past the Elk Creek Bridge, Earl finally spoke. "You believe that?" he said. "A judge saying our name out loud like that?" "I believe it," Ruth said. "Your daddy-in-law believed it 50 years before she did." Earl smiled at that. Small, tired. Amos Bell. Waiting on a road that took its sweet time. They pulled into the motel lot a little after noon. The room's $5 sign stood there, same as always, rust-patched now, the back panel screwed shut tight where Earl had fixed it himself. Hollis's truck was already parked crooked by the office. He climbed out when he saw them, hat in his hand. "Figured you'd want somebody here when the truck came." "What truck?" Ruth said. "Repo truck," Hollis said. "Saw it heading up 19 not 20 minutes ago. County's small enough, everybody hears everything by lunch." Earl looked toward the road. "Duane's crew cab." "That'd be my guess," Hollis said. It was. By 2 o'clock, Duane's sedan sat crooked in the lot again, same spot as before, engine still ticking as it cooled. He got out slower than last time. No jacket now, just a work shirt, sleeves pushed up like a man who'd been arguing with somebody on the phone all morning. Ruth was on the porch shelling beans into a bowl, apron over her good church dress, the teal cardigan draped over the rail beside her. "They took it this morning," Duane said. "No greeting first. Truck's gone. Bank didn't even wait till Friday." "Sorry to hear that," Ruth said, and meant it enough to say it plain, not enough to put the bowl down. "Laurel's salon deal fell through too. Landlord wanted the deposit by Monday. We didn't have it." Duane stood at the bottom of the steps, hands empty at his sides. Perkins sent a bill. $4,200. Said that's just for the filings, not counting today. "Court costs don't care who wins," Ruth said. "No," Duane said. "They don't." Earl came out onto the porch, dish towel still over his shoulder from the sink. He didn't say anything, just stood there, watching his son the way he used to watch a green mechanic try to guess a torque spec instead of looking it up. "I came to say something," Dwayne said, "not asking for anything, just saying it." "Say it," Ruth said. "I shouldn't have laughed," he said, at the lawyer's table, that day. His jaw worked once. "I said, take the house, take the truck, take the account, leave you the $5 dump. I said it like a joke in front of everybody. Wasn't right, doing that to my own mother and father." Ruth kept shelling beans, the pop of a pod, the small rattle into the bowl. "You said it because you believed it," she said. "That's worse than mean, Dwayne. Mean, a person can take back. Believing your own parents are worth less than a joke? That's harder to put down." Dwayne looked at the gravel. "I'm not asking you to forgive it today," he said. "I know that's not owed to me." "No," Ruth said, "it isn't." Earl finally spoke. "But it's not closed off forever either. Man can earn his way back into a family. Takes longer than a truck payment is all." Dwayne's eyes came up at that, something like hope in them, careful, like he didn't trust it yet. "What would that look like?" he said. "Earning it." Ruth set the bowl down on the porch rail. "There's a leak over room 6. Roofing nails in the shed, tar paper too. You know how to lay shingle, your daddy taught you same as he taught Earl. You want me to work on the motel," Dwayne said, like he hadn't expected that answer. "I want to see you show up," Ruth said, "not with a check. With your hands, 8 o'clock tomorrow. I'll pay you same as I'd pay any hired man, $15 an hour, cash, same as I pay Hollis's nephew when he helps haul. Not a gift, Dwayne, a wage. You earn it same as everybody else." Dwayne stood there a moment, something moving behind his face that looked almost like relief, mixed in with something harder to carry, shame maybe, finally landing where it belonged. "Laurel's not going to like that," he said. 15 an hour after what we had." "Laurel's not the one standing on my porch," Ruth said. "You are." He nodded, slow. 8 o'clock, he said. 8 o'clock, Ruth said. "Don't be late. Your daddy taught you that too once." He walked back to the car without answering that, but Ruth saw his shoulders different going down the steps than they'd been coming up them. Not straight yet, just different. Hollis waited until the sedan pulled out before he spoke. "That's more mercy than I'd have managed," he said. "It's not mercy," Ruth said. "It's a job. Mercy's what happens after the job's done a while." 2 days later, Odell Marsh drove out from the highway department himself, a folder under his arm and a state pickup with the seal on the door. He walked the frontage with Earl, tape measure stretched between them, marking stakes every 20 feet along the ditch line. Appraisal came back, Marsh said, when they'd finished the last stake. 1.92 million, full acquisition and relocation. Board approved it Tuesday. Check gets cut once the deed's recorded clean. Probably 3 weeks. Ruth stood on the porch, listening. 3 weeks, she said. "Give or take," Marsh said. "State moves slow till it wants to move fast. Once the money's approved, it wants to be gone." "And after that," Earl asked, "road still needs somewhere to put the bypass. What happens to this land once you've bought it?" "Corridor takes about half your frontage," Marsh said. "The rest reverts back to you. Clear title, no restrictions. You'd have the money in a motel sitting back off a brand new highway with better sightlines than it's got now." He looked over at the old sign, rust-patched, paint peeling around the 5. "Man, be smart to think about what comes next for a place like this." Ruth looked at Earl. Earl looked at the sign. "Amos always said the road would ask eventually," Ruth said. "Guess it finally did." Marsh tipped his hat and drove off, gravel popping under his tires, same as everybody's did on that lot. Ruth watched him go, then turned to the sign, its rusted 5 still catching the afternoon sun, patched panel screwed down tight where a whole family's fortune had waited 50 years for somebody honest enough to look behind it. 3 weeks, Earl said again, testing the words like a torque spec he wanted to double-check. 3 weeks, Ruth said, and then we'll see what this place wants to be next. Dwayne's car came up the gravel at 7:50 the next morning, headlights still on though the sun was already over the ridge. He parked straight this time, not crooked. Earl was already on the ladder against room 6, shingles stacked below him, tar paper rolled out flat on the grass. "You're early," Earl said, not looking down. "Didn't want to be late twice in one lifetime," Dwayne said. He'd brought his own hammer, old one, wood handle gone smooth, the same hammer Earl had given him for his 16th birthday, back when Dwayne still wanted to learn engines instead of sell trucks. Ruth watched from the porch, coffee in both hands, and didn't say anything about the hammer. Some things you let a man carry without pointing at them. Nail lines chalked already, Earl said. 6-inch reveal, same as your granddaddy taught me. You still remember that much? I remember, Dwayne said. They worked without much talking for an hour. Earl called out measurements, Dwayne cut, passed shingles up when Earl's knee wouldn't let him climb twice. By 9, the sun was hard on the tin roof, and Dwayne had sweat through his shirt collar. 15 an hour, Earl said, checking his watch. You've earned $30 so far. Your mother keeps the ledger in the kitchen in case you want to see it add up. I don't need to see it add up, Dwayne said. I need to do the work. Around 10, Laurel's car pulled in behind his. Quick, gravel spitting. She didn't get out all the way, just stood at the open door, sunglasses on, arms crossed. You're really doing this, she said to Dwayne, loud enough to carry up the ladder. Fixing their roof for $15 an hour. It's a wage, Laurel, Dwayne said. Same as anybody. We owe Perkins $4,000, she said. 15 an hour isn't going to touch that. No, Dwayne said. It won't. That's mine to figure out. Not theirs. Laurel looked up at Ruth on the porch a second, something sharp in her face, gone before it landed anywhere. Fine, she said. Rebuild whatever you want to rebuild. She got back in the car and left the way she'd come, faster than the gravel liked. Dwayne stood on the ladder a moment, hammer loose in his hand. She's not wrong to be angry, he said, mostly to the roof. No, Earl said. She isn't. Hand me that next shingle. They worked through lunch. Ruth brought out sandwiches on a tray, bologna and cheese, same as she'd made for church picnics 40 years running. Hollis showed up a little after 1 with a coil of new gutter and didn't ask why Dwayne was up on the roof, just handed tools up like it was any other job site. Frontage stakes are holding, Hollis said. State crew came by this morning, marked the corridor line with paint. Blue for keep, orange for take. Ruth looked out at the ditch line, where thin orange flags now stood every 20 feet, bright as a warning nobody needed anymore. Half the lot, she said. About half, Hollis said. Same as Marsh told you. Checks moving through Charleston now. Man I know in the comptroller's office says it's cut, just waiting on the deed recording to clear. How much exactly? Dwayne asked from the ladder, quiet, like he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. $1,924,600, Hollis said. Full number, once you count the relocation piece for the office building. Nobody said anything for a second. Dwayne set the hammer down on the roof peak, careful, like it might slip if his hand shook. That's more than the house, he said. More than the truck and the account put together. About 6 times more, Ruth said, not unkind, just plain, the same way she'd say the price of butter had gone up. Dwayne looked down at his mother a long moment. I laughed at that number once, he said, called it a joke before I even knew what it was. You did, Ruth said. Hand me down that empty tray, would you? Standing up here talking, you'll drop it on somebody's head. He climbed down, handed her the tray, and went back to work, without saying more. That was its own kind of answer, Ruth thought. A man who used to talk his way past every hard thing, finally choosing to just lay shingle instead. By late afternoon, the roof over room 6 was patched clean, black shingle bright against the faded gray of the rest, one honest square in a field of worn ones. Earl stood back to look at it, hands on his hips, knee locked stiff from the climbing. Looks like a bandage on an old dog, he said. Bandages heal things, Ruth said. The check came through 11 days later, not 3 weeks like Marsh had guessed, the deed recording clearing faster than the state usually moved for anything. Ruth signed for the certified letter at the mailbox, Hollis standing beside her because he'd said he wanted to see her face when she opened it, and Earl came out from under the truck he was fixing for a neighbor, wiping his hands on a rag that used to be a shirt. She opened the envelope at the kitchen table, same table where she'd once done the motel books with a pencil and a coffee can full of $5 bills. The letter from the state comptroller's office was short. The number at the bottom was not. $1,924,600, Ruth read out loud, less legal fees of $11,200, net to owners $1,913,400. Earl sat down slow across from her. That's a real number, he said. written down and everything. It's real, Hollis said. Told you it would be. Ruth folded the letter along a crease, same habit as always, and set it next to the coffee can. Half the frontage goes to the highway, she said. Rest of it's still ours. Still got a motel sitting on it. Half a motel's worth of land, Earl said, and better road frontage than it ever had before. Man could do something with that. A man could, Ruth said. Question is what? She looked out the kitchen window at the old sign, the rust patched, the 5 still faded but legible, the back panel screwed down tight where a family's whole fortune had waited 50 years for somebody willing to look behind a rattle. Amos had built it to last exactly this long. Not longer, not shorter, just long enough. Your father used to say a road always tells you what it wants, built beside it, Ruth said. Diner, gas station, motel that isn't ashamed of itself. Which one's this road asking for? Earl said. Same one it always wanted, Ruth said. Just done right this time. Hollis leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching them the way a man watches weather he's glad isn't coming for him. You thinking of rebuilding? He said. I'm thinking of naming it something true, Ruth said, before I think about rebuilding anything. She got up, went to the hall closet, and came back with the old shoebox of motel photographs, black and white mostly, curling at the corners. She found the one she wanted near the bottom. Amos standing in front of the sign the week it went up, grinning, hand flat against the metal like he was swearing an oath on it. He never got his name on anything, she said. Not the deed, not the sign, not the obituary column past 2 lines. Man built the whole thing and let it say Mercer's Rest, not Bell's anything, because he married into this family and figured that's how it ought to read. So change it, Earl said. Ruth looked at the photograph a long moment, thumb tracing the edge of it, the way she used to trace the ribbon on her keys. Amos Bell Traveler's House, she said, testing the words out loud, the way Earl tested a torque spec before he trusted it. That's what I want painted on the new sign. Earl nodded slow. Man waited 50 years for a road to ask, he said. Least we can do is let it say his name when it finally opened its mouth. Perkins called them in on a Thursday. Same office, same table, same chair Ruth had wiped coffee off of 6 months before. This time the coffee stayed in the cups. Probate's closing out today, Perkins said, sliding a folder across the table. Final accounting on your father's estate, Ruth. I need signatures from all named parties before the court seals it. Dwayne sat across from his parents, same seat as before. Laurel wasn't with him. He had a folded paper sticking out of his shirt pocket, corners soft like he'd carried it a few days without deciding anything about it. All named parties, Ruth said. That's me, Earl, and Dwayne. Correct, Perkins said. The motel and its acreage passed to you and Earl free and clear under the original will. Dwayne, your interest in that portion was 0 from day one. I want that on the record plane, since there was some confusion at the first meeting about what got divided. There wasn't confusion, Dwayne said. I said take it. I meant it as a joke. Court doesn't care what you meant, Perkins said. Only what's filed. And what's filed says the motel was never yours to joke about. He turned a page. State's acquisition is final too. Deed recorded Tuesday. Highway Department wired the funds into an escrow account in Ruth and Earl's name Wednesday morning. $1,913,400 net of the $11,200 in recording and legal costs I mentioned before. We already knew the number, Earl said. You knew Odell Marsh's number, Perkins said. This is the court's number. Different signature on it. Matters legally, which one's which. Ruth folded her hands on the table. Get to the part where you need us to sign something. Perkins slid 2 more pages across. Acknowledgement of full and final distribution. You confirm receipt, you confirm no further claims exist against the estate from any heir. Any heir, Ruth repeated. She looked at Dwayne. That mean you too. Means me too, Dwayne said. Perkins looked at him. You understand what you're agreeing to. No claim now, no claim later, no claim if the value goes up again next year, next decade. Whatever this land does from here belongs to your parents. I understand it, Dwayne said. He didn't look angry saying it. That was the difference Ruth noticed most, more than the words. 6 months ago, he'd have laughed through a sentence like that. Now his voice came out flat and plain, like a man reading his own ticket back to a clerk. Ruth signed first. Earl signed after her, hand a little shaky, same as it had been shaky signing the first deed, though not from the same reason this time. Then Perkins turned the page toward Dwayne. "Your signature closes it," Perkins said. "Once it's filed, there's no reopening this. Not for you, not for Laurel, not for any lawyer either of you hires down the road." Dwayne picked up the pen, held it a second without writing. "Something wrong?" Ruth asked. "No," Dwayne said. "Just wanted to feel the weight of it before I did it. Last time I signed something at this table, I didn't feel anything. Felt like paperwork. This one feels like something." He signed, set the pen down square on the page, careful, like a man closing a drawer he didn't want to slam. Perkins gathered the pages, tapped them straight. "That's it. Court'll enter the final order inside a week. After that, this file's closed." Dwayne reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the folded paper he'd been carrying. He set it on the table but didn't push it forward. "What's that?" Earl asked. "Truck financing," Dwayne said. "Not the crew cab. Used one, off the lot in Sutton. $9,200. I can carry the payment on what I make roofing and what I still pull from the dealership, but the bank wants a cosigner since my credit's still rough from the repo." Nobody said anything. Ruth watched him turn the paper over once, like he was deciding whether to slide it the rest of the way. "I'm not asking," Dwayne said. "I want to say that first. I know I don't get to ask you for anything, not after what I said at this table the first time. I just wanted you to see it. See that I'm buying something I can afford, this time. Not something Laurel picked out because it looked right in the driveway." Earl looked at the paper without touching it. $9,000, he said. "That's a truck a workingman drives, not a showpiece." "That's what it is," Dwayne said. "A workingman's truck." He folded the paper back up and put it away without asking either of them to sign anything. "I'll find a cosigner at the bank." "Wasn't fishing. Just wanted you both to see I learned the difference between a truck and a truck payment." Ruth studied her son's face a long moment. Something in her chest loosened. Small, the size of a coin, not the size of a door swinging open. "Bring the paperwork by the motel Saturday," she said. "After you're done with the shingles on room 4. I'll look it over. Not promising anything. But I'll look." "That's more than I came in here expecting," Dwayne said. "I know," Ruth said. "That's usually how it works when you stop expecting things." Perkins closed the folder, looked between the three of them like a man who'd seen plenty of families leave his office worse than they walked in, and not many leave better. "For what it's worth," he said, "I've closed a lot of estates. Don't often see one where the joke turns out to be the whole inheritance." "Wasn't a joke to my father," Ruth said. "Just took the rest of us 50 years to catch up to what he meant by it." Outside, the parking lot sun was hard and white, July heat already pressing up off the asphalt. Dwayne's car sat 2 spaces down from Earl's truck, the one Hollis's nephew had helped him find, an older Ford with a dent in the tailgate and good tires, nothing showy about it. "That's your truck now," Earl said, nodding at it. "For now," Dwayne said, "till I can afford better. Won't be borrowing better this time. Earning it." He got in and drove off slower than he used to, hands at 10 and 2, like a man who'd finally noticed the speed limit existed for him too. Ruth and Earl stood by their own truck a moment before getting in. "You believe him?" Earl asked. "I believe the paper," Ruth said. $9,000 in a bank asking for a cosigner. That's not a man performing for us. That's a man broke enough to need help and honest enough to ask for it plain instead of laughing his way past it." "Your father would have liked that boy today," Earl said. "Not the one from the first meeting. This one." "My father liked slow proof better than fast promises," Ruth said. "Said a man's word is worth exactly what it costs him to keep it. Dwayne's word cost him a crew cab, a house, and his pride. That's a real price. Makes the next thing he says worth more." They drove back out toward Route 19, the new orange survey flags still fluttering along half the frontage where the corridor would come through inside the year. The old room's $5 sign came into view before the motel did. Same rust, same patched panel, but new now too. A fresh coat of white primer waiting on sawhorses behind the office, canvas thrown over it against the weather, waiting on paint. Earl slowed the truck at the turn-in. "Sign painter's coming Monday," he said. "Fella out of Sutton does the courthouse lettering, told him what we wanted." "Amos Bell Traveler's House," Ruth said, testing it again. the way she had at the kitchen table. Still sounds right every time I say it. Sounds like a place a man could be proud his name was on, Earl said. Ruth looked out at the lot. Gravel raked now, weeds pulled from along the walk. The shed door hung straight on new hinges. It didn't look like a $5 dump anymore. It looked like a place waiting on its own future, patient the way her father had always been patient, the way he'd taught her without ever once explaining why. "Turn in," she said. "Let's go see how much of it Dwayne finished today." They turned in past the ditch line, orange flags still snapping in the wind. The roof over the whole east wing was done. Black shingle ran clean from end to end now, no gray patches left. Dwayne stood on the ground coiling extension cord, shirt soaked through, face red from sun. "Finished 20 minutes ago," he said. "Gutters, too. Hollis showed me how to hang them level." Earl walked the length of the wing, hands shading his eyes. "Good line," he said. "Square with the fascia." "Hollis checked it 3 times before he'd let me nail it," Dwayne said. "Man doesn't trust a tape measure he didn't hold himself." Ruth looked up at the new roofline, black against gray sky. Honest work laid over an old bone structure. "Your grandfather would have liked this roof," she said. "I hope so," Dwayne said. Saturday he came back with the folded truck paper. Same shirt pocket, corners softer now. Ruth met him at the office door, coffee can of old motel receipts still sitting on the counter behind her, habit she hadn't broken. "Let's see it," she said. He spread the paper flat. $9,200, financed through a Sutton bank, 48 months, needing a cosigner because his credit still carried the repo mark. Ruth read it twice. Earl stood behind her, arms crossed. "I'm not cosigning a banknote," Ruth said. Dwayne's face went still. "Okay," he said. "I figured. I just wanted you to see it anyway." "Let me finish," Ruth said. "I'm not co-signing. I'm loaning it. Straight from us. $9,200, 4% interest, paid back in 3 years. Papers drawn up by Perkins so it's real and not just a mother's kindness you can forget about." Dwayne looked at her a long moment. 4%, he said. "Bank would have charged you 9, Ruth said. "I'm not running a charity. I'm running a loan. You miss a payment, Perkins garnishes it same as any bank would." "That's fair," Dwayne said. "Quiet. That's more than fair." "It's not a gift," Ruth said. "I want that plain. A gift you can waste and feel bad about later. A loan you have to show up for every month on paper. I'd rather you show up." Dwayne nodded slow. "I'll show up." Earl reached out and shook his son's hand, same as he would with any man closing a deal on a job site. "Truck's a good truck," he said. 9,200's an honest number." "It is," Dwayne said. He folded the paper back into his pocket, careful now instead of soft with worry. "I'll bring the payment book by 1st of the month. Every month. You'll see it before Perkins does." "I'd like that," Ruth said. He drove off in the dented Ford, slower than before, taillights fading past the orange flags. Monday morning, a truck from Sutton pulled into the lot before 8, ladder racks rattling. A man named Gene Pruitt climbing out with brushes and a case of enamel paint. He was the same man who did the courthouse lettering, gold leaf on brick, steady hand even at 70. "Hollis said you wanted it plain," Gene said. "No fancy script. Just true. Plain and true," Ruth said. "That's the whole order." The old sign frame stood primed white on its posts now, Earl and Dwayne having hauled it up together the week before, bolted it back over the same footing Amos had poured in 1959. The rust was gone. The patched panel on the back sat sealed and painted same as the rest, no seam showing at all unless a man knew exactly where to look. Gene snapped a chalk line, stepped back, squinted at the boards. "Amos Bell Traveler's House," he read off his own drawing. "That the whole of it?" "That's the whole of it," Ruth said. "No room rates on there? No vacancy light?" "Vacancy light goes back up separate," Earl said. "Rates go on a little board under it. This part's just his name." Gene nodded, like that made sense to him. The way it made sense to a man who'd lettered 100 storefronts and understood some signs were about business, and some signs were about paying a debt. Hollis showed up around 10, stood next to Ruth with his thumbs hooked in his belt, watching Gene lay in the first black strokes of the A. "Been a long time since anybody painted a name that big out here," Hollis said. "Been a long time since anybody earned one," Ruth said. "He'd have hated the fuss," Hollis said. "Amos. Man never once let anybody thank him out loud for anything." I know, Ruth said. That's exactly why I'm doing it anyway. By early afternoon, the letters were blocked in, black on white, drying in the sun. Amos Bell, the top line said, and under it, smaller, Traveler's House. Below that, a bare board waited for the room rate, whatever number they finally settled on, $5 long, retired now, a joke that had turned out to be a key. Gene packed his brushes back into the truck bed. Come back Thursday for the second coat, he said. Paint needs to cure a day before it holds true black. Thursday's fine, Ruth said. She stood a while after his truck pulled out, looking at the drying letters, Earl beside her, both of them quiet the way people get quiet in front of something finished that took longer to arrive than either of them expected to live to see. He waited 50 years for this sign, Ruth said. Didn't even know he was waiting, just kept mowing the ditch and paying the taxes and telling me not to sell. Man had faith in a road, Earl said. Not a common thing to have faith in. He had faith in me, Ruth said. The road just happened to prove him right. She reached up without thinking about it and touched the ribbon at her neck. The motel keys still hanging there, the same 3 keys she'd carried since the day Perkins first laid the deed on the table. Guess I don't need to keep wearing these, she said. Not like anybody's stealing anything out of an empty motel. Wear them anyway, Earl said. Man doesn't take off a good habit just because the reason changed. Ruth almost smiled at that. Almost. Your father used to say something just like that, she said, about the truck. Said a man keeps his tools sharp whether or not he's got a job lined up, because the work always comes eventually, one way or another. Guess it did, Earl said, looking up at the drying paint, letters catching the last flat light of the afternoon. Thursday, Gene Pruitt came back like he said, second coat of black gone on thick and glossy, the white background chalk white against it. He stood back from his ladder, checked the paint against the daylight, nodded once. Holds true black now, he said. Won't fade for 20 years. Easy. Long enough, Ruth said. Earl paid him in cash from the escrow account, $300 folded into an envelope, and Gene counted it once. Quick, professional. Then shook Earl's hand instead of counting it twice. Best sign I've lettered all year, Gene said. Most of what I paint is for banks. Feels different painting a name that belongs to a person. He drove off with his ladder racks rattling, same as he'd arrived, and the lot went quiet except for wind moving through the ditch grass. That evening, Ruth strung the old floodlight back up under the eave, the one that used to light the office door back when Amos ran the place, socket rewired by Dwayne 2 weekends before, as part of what he called making himself useful without being asked twice. Earl flipped the breaker at dusk. The light caught the sign square, threw the black letters up sharp against the white board. Amos Bell, Traveler's House. Underneath, on the little board, Earl had built and hung on 2 brackets, a single line in smaller black paint, rooms from $65, not $5 anymore. Ruth had settled on that number after pricing the cheapest chain motel in Sutton, and cutting it by 10, said a fair price still had to be a fair price even on land the state wanted. Dwayne came by that evening with the truck payment book, first entry already stamped paid, and stood in the gravel lot looking up at the lit sign a long moment before he said anything. Looks like a real place, he said. Was always a real place, Ruth said. Just needed the dirt washed off it. Laurel wants to bring the kids by this weekend, Dwayne said. Not asking for anything. Just wants them to see where their grandpa used to fix roofs Saturdays, where you're staying now. Ruth looked at him a long moment. You mean my grandkids, she said. Been a while since anybody brought them around. I know, Dwayne said. That's on me. Laurel, too. We kept them close to her side of things. Wasn't right. Bring them Saturday, Ruth said. I'll have the office fixed up enough to sit in by then. I'll make lemonade. They'd like that, Dwayne said. He looked back up at the sign once more before he left, headlights swinging slow across the gravel as he turned out onto Route 19, taillights fading past the orange survey flag still snapping in the evening wind. Ruth and Earl stood under the new light a while longer, the bugs already gathering in the beam of it, moths circling the bulb the way they'd circle any light left on long enough in the dark. $65, Earl said. Amos would have called that robbery. Amos never had to fix a roof with a torn-up knee, Ruth said. Prices change. People don't, not underneath. 2 weeks later, a state pickup with a highway department decal pulled into the lot around noon. A young man in a hard hat climbing out with a clipboard and a laser level. He introduced himself as a survey tech, said he was flagging the final grade stakes before construction crews broke ground on the frontage cut. Hollis showed up not long after, like he always did when there was a stake in the ground worth watching, and stood next to the young man while he sighted his level down the property line. "You're setting these off the 74 marks," Hollis said. It wasn't a question. The tech looked up, surprised. "How'd you know that?" "Because I set half of them myself," Hollis said. "Man named Amos Bell set the rest." This whole corridor's been surveyed twice. Once by the state, once by a man selling $5 rooms who understood exactly what the state would need before the state knew it needed it. The tech looked at his own paperwork, at the reference numbers stamped on the old iron pins still buried at the corners. "There's a note in our regional file," he said. "Says to cross-check any old motor court or filling station along a bypass corridor for private survey markers before we finalize acquisition boundaries." Didn't know why it was there. Figured it was boilerplate. "It's not boilerplate," Hollis said. "It's because of this exact stretch of road. Because a family almost got shorted a couple $1,000,000 over a sign nobody bothered to look inside." The tech wrote something on his clipboard, slower this time. "I'll pass that along when I train the new hires," he said. "Good to know the why behind a rule instead of just the rule." Hollis watched him walk his line out toward the ditch, level tucked under his arm, careful now where he planted his stakes near the signpost. "There it is," Hollis said to Ruth, low, almost to himself. "Amos didn't just save you two. He's saving some family down the line neither one of us will ever meet." "That was always him," Ruth said, "fixing things quiet years before anybody needed fixing." Saturday, Dwayne's truck pulled in with Laurel in the passenger seat and the two grandkids in the back, a boy of 9 and a girl of 6, both pressing their faces to the window at the new sign before the truck had even stopped rolling. Laurel got out slow, uncertain, holding a grocery bag of cookies like a peace offering she wasn't sure would be accepted. "Ruth," she said, "been a long time?" "Been a long time," Ruth agreed. She didn't hug her, not yet, but she took the bag of cookies and looked inside it, same as she'd have looked inside any gift brought to her door, fair and plain. Store-bought's fine. Nobody expects a first visit to come with a pie. The kids ran straight for the shed where Earl kept the mower, then to the new gutters, then to the sign itself, the girl reaching up on her toes trying to touch the bottom edge of the letters she couldn't reach. "That's your great-grandfather's name," Ruth told her. "Amos Bell. He built this whole place before your daddy was even born." "Was he nice?" the girl asked. "He was fair," Ruth said. "Fair's better than nice most days." Laurel stood near the office door, arms crossed loose, watching Earl show the boy how the extension ladder locked at each rung. "Dwayne told me what happened," Laurel said. "The whole thing. The sign, the key, the money. Most of the town knows by now," Ruth said. "News travels faster than a coal truck downhill." "I said some things at that lawyer's office," Laurel said. "About the house. About y'all not being able to manage on your own." She stopped, started again. "I was wrong. I'm not going to dress it up prettier than it was." Ruth studied her a moment. "I appreciate you saying it plain," she said. "I'm not going to pretend it didn't sting, but I'll take a plain apology over a fancy one every time." "That's fair," Laurel said. "It usually is," Ruth said, and left it there. No promise of anything beyond that afternoon, no grand forgiveness handed over like a deed. Just two women standing in a gravel lot with a bag of cookies between them, which was enough for one Saturday. That evening, after Dwayne's truck had pulled out and the kids' laughter had faded down Route 19, Ruth sat on the office step with Earl, the new sign glowing steady above them, moths circling same as always. $65, Earl said again, like the number still amused him. Man could stay a whole week for what Dwayne almost paid for a truck bed liner. "It was never about the $5, Ruth said, watching the light hold steady against the dark pines across the road. "Never was. Wasn't about the money after either. Was about somebody trusting you with something long enough for it to prove itself." Earl reached over and took her hand, the ribbon still at her neck, 3 keys catching what light spilled down from the sign. Across the road, a coal truck downshifted hard for the curve, headlights sweeping once over the fresh white paint, over the name written black and permanent above the empty gravel lot, before rattling on towards Sutton in the dark.